Hello and welcome back to the second set of quarterfinals here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by Simon Gertzen, and after we've had the, well, fastest and slowest decks in our top 8 able to do their thing in our first set of quarterfinals, we're going to get to see how the humans fare on the other side of the bracket. We're going to have Javier Dominguez against Gerry Thompson, and of course Pascal Viren against Andrea Mengucci. Let's head down to our feature match area to see how the humans fare here at Rivals of Ixalan. Hello and welcome to the second set of quarterfinals here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. On both sides of our bracket, we have, on both tables here in our feature match area, we have humans decks. One of them is in the hands of Javier Dominguez. He's up against Gerry Thompson. Thompson on a Mardu Pyromancer list that has just a crazy amount of removal. This is one of the matchups that he's been hoping to face, and he's faced it a lot this weekend and has been very, very positive in that matchup. Javier Dominguez with humans, though, this is a deck that can sometimes just have super explosive draws. He may be able to find a way out of this one.
Yes, Tim. Javier relies on having really good opening hands. For example, a card he's really looking for is Ether Vial, or as we see here, Noble Hierarch to just power out these disruptive and aggressive humans earlier.
Noble Hierarch coming down, that will of course mean that potentially multiple threats can be played on turn 2 by Javier Dominguez. Gerry Thompson starts things off with an Inquisition of Kozilek to see what he's up against. There's a Meddling Mage, Kitesail Freebooter, Phantasmal Image, along with another Noble Hierarch. This is a relatively disruptive hand.
It's disruptive, but it's not very aggressive. No Champion of the Parish, no Thalia's Lieutenant. On the other hand, Gerry Thompson can be kind of happy. Well, he has a discard spell, but the card he's most scared about is actually Thalia. Because his deck is very much reliant on casting a lot of spells, sometimes multiple per turn, actually.
Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, of course, the card that makes all of those spells cost just the one more. And right here, Gerry Thompson, the game playing out in the early turns reasonably well for him. He's able to make sure that he's getting rid of that Kitesail Freebooter, keeping a bit of information hidden so that Meddling Mage might not be quite as potent. And talking to Gerry about how this matchup goes, it is not uncommon to see him going relatively low on life in this game if there is a quick start from humans, but gradually, once he gets to start casting multiple removal spells a turn, he can turn that around. And we saw him doing that time and again in the Swiss.
Yes, the only reach that the humans deck has is Keswick Malcontent, which can be dangerous for Gerry in such a spot. But against Mantis Rider, for example, against the haste creatures, he has Lingering Souls, which is just superb at producing blockers.
Thompson here just waving at his opponent as a Meddling Mage comes down. No extra information coming from him. Game face on, and meanwhile, showing off some very impressive sleeves there. Gerry's sleeve game, always known to be good. And Lightning Bolt, the name from Meddling Mage. I guess that in the dark, naming a removal spell is a pretty safe bet.
Yes, because if that's in Gerry's hand, he could just otherwise Lightning Bolt the Meddling Mage and then cast whatever else Javier named. So, of course, there are other removal spells, but 4 Lightning Bolts are one of the key cards in Thompson's deck.
As things stand, though, it was a swing and a miss. There's a Terminate in there, a couple of copies of Faithless Looting, Thoughtseize, and so on and so forth. Gerry Thompson, he has Lingering Souls in his deck, but it's much easier for him to cast from the graveyard than it is from hand. The flashback of just 1 on a black, very straightforward for him there. And we can see that it looks like Javier Dominguez could be on the lots of Meddling Mage plan, try and lock you out of all of the key spells. Maybe a little optimistic, but if he's able to happen to spike the cards that are in Gerry Thompson's hand, things could go rather well for him as he cracks a Horizon Canopy, looking to find a little bit more action, and ultimately just finding another land. Something that must be said about this humans deck, the mana base in it, pretty spectacular as long as you're willing to concede to the fact that you're just casting lots of humans. Getting the appropriate colors, very, very easy indeed, and being able to get lots of the appropriate colors without costing yourself any life in the form of fetch lands or pain.
This is a nice attack by Javier. He realizes that if he attacks with Meddling Mage and Gerry has a way to remove it, then he's not dealing any damage this turn. So rather than that, he wants to make sure he gets something either way.
on 17.
Yeah, exalted, of course, meaning there's a little bit of damage coming through. And here comes a terminate from Gerry, dealing with the first meddling mage in response to the second. We'll find out whether or not Javier wants to name Lightning Bolt once again with this second meddling mage, or perhaps something different.
And Gerry responds here because otherwise Javier could have named Terminate, and Gerry would have been stuck, maybe not been able to remove those creatures.
Looks like Javier does go for the Lightning Bolt. We will find out whether or not that's actively going to be doing anything to Gerry in the next couple of turns or so. With Faithless Looting, I suppose, even in the case that a key removal spell that Gerry is really stuck being able to cast does get stuck in hand, he can always discard it, so not the end of the world for him there.
Gerry is pretty well set up against a Meddling Mage. He does have those 4 Lightning Bolts, but otherwise, if you look at his list, 3 Collar Guns command, a Dreadbore, a Terminate, so 2 Fatal Push, a lot of different ways of answering creatures.
And one card that's in Gerry Thompson's list, over and above the removal he's got access to the card Blood Moon, 2 of them in the main deck. Now, one thing about the mana base for this humans list, not too many basics to work with.
No, although at the time that Blood Moon can come down, and there are only 2 in the main deck, then usually the humans deck already has a pretty significant board presence. So I'm not even sure if Blood Moon will play such an important role in this matchup.
There we can see close-up of Thompson's hand there, figuring out what he wants to discard to Faithless Looting. The easy one being the Lingering Souls. That can be flashback very straightforwardly in Gerry Thompson's list. The second card a little bit more complicated. Looks like at some point he says he doesn't need an extra Thoughtseize. Javier Dominguez already low enough on cards in hand that he's willing to try and be a bit more proactive. And also, if he really wants to hit those cards in hand, there is still a Collar Guns command. That'll snipe an extra card out of Dominguez's hand.
Thompson has a great hand here. He has a 3rd mana source, which is very important. He still has more discard, an Inquisition in his hand, and Collective Brutality to take out the mage. So those 2 I think I didn't mention. So actually Meddling Mage is not really that big of a threat, and Javier is actually drawing mono Meddling Mages here.
Yeah, mono Meddling Mage. There was a time and a place for it, but that time may have been Invasion Block constructed. In the meantime, the attacks in from Noble Hierarch are the key action that Javier Dominguez has going on in this early game. And while he's ahead on life, the amount of damage he's been able to mete out in these early turns, far from exciting. And Gerry Thompson, at his leisure, able to gradually take down creatures, and at some point we'll see him look to turn around this game. Now, the way that Gerry Thompson actually wins the game, he does have creatures of his own. He can either get into play Young Pyromancer and start making a lot of elemental tokens, or he can get down Bedlam Reveler, and with the amount of spells that he can cast, Prowess can very quickly close out games.
Yeah, but the key here is if he draws a Bedlam Reveler, he actually refuels with 3 new cards and draws more removal, more Bedlam Revelers, more Collar Guns commands. And that's really the turning point in the game where an aggro deck like humans just knows it can't really compete anymore.
Quick update from our back table. Tough day at the office for the humans decks. Already a game picked up by Pascal Viren. And Pascal Viren, I spoke to him a little bit before these quarterfinals. He did say he thinks that he's a slight underdog in game 1s, or pre-sideboard games, should I say. But post-sideboard, he feels it gets a little better. And he said, if I'm able to snag a game or 2 before we go to sideboards, then I think I'm pretty good shape. So based on that analysis, right now, Pascal Viren in pretty good shape.
Yeah, of course, Pascal also on the play, quite relevant because he dominated the Swiss portion. He's undefeated. 4 draws, okay, but still, no losses.
Reflector Mage, they're dealing with a Spirit token. Reflector Mage, in some matchups, absolutely backbreaking. There, it wasn't able to get too much going. A simple 2/3 Wizard for 3 that deals with 1 Spirit token. And that not the kind of exchange that's necessarily one that Gerry Thompson's going to mind too much. I guess technically the 3rd point of toughness means it's safe from Collective Brutality and Collar Guns command, but Fatal Push at some point may become relevant if permanent is able to be put into the graveyard by Gerry Thompson on his turn. Manamorphose in Gerry Thompson's deck, kind of an interesting one. Can you talk us through why that might be in there, Simon?
Yeah, we have to say it's just a one-off, so it's actually not super relevant to the game plan, but it does fuel different things. It fuels the Pyromancer, it fuels the Bedlam Reveler, and you're playing a deck that with 2 Blood Moons, and if you have a Blood Moon in play, you can't cast your own Lingering Souls. So having that bit of extra mana fixing in the main deck is actually a nice touch.
Yeah, that's the kind of touch that I'm never surprised to see in a Gerry Thompson deck. I think of Gerry Thompson as being one of the premier players in the game in terms of both picking a great deck for the metagame and then making the tiny tweaks that really make it sing on any given weekend. Thompson here on 13, but untroubled too much by the attacks coming in from Dominguez. Relentless though they may be, these blue-white wizards, they're not exactly the beatdown machines that perhaps Javier Dominguez hoping to find in the draw of this opening game against Thompson. Fatal push, and now a Bedlam Rebel, discarding Blood Moon, drawing 3 new cards. Now we're off to the races. Gerry Thompson, he's on 9 life, but he can potentially take some pretty big chunks out of Javier Dominguez, especially given that he's had the opportunity to refuel his hand just a little bit with the enter the battlefield trigger of the Reveler.
Yeah, you can see that Gerry didn't really bother keeping that Blood Moon around. Casting Bedlam Reveler was much more important, and 2 cards you see on Javier's side, Ether Vial and Noble Hierarch, are also a reason why you can't rely on Blood Moon to lock out the humans deck.
Ether Vial, one of the cards that there are some builds of humans that they eschew the Ether Vial, looking to go a little bigger and work with Collected Company. This version able to be a little bit more aggressive. It can have an explosive start. Also, I mean, both of these cards good against counter magic, but the Ether Vial consistently getting creatures into play at instant speed, letting you kind of sculpt a game plan maybe a little bit more, whereas Collected Company, explosive in the moment.
Yeah, the Collected Company versions didn't do as well as the regular 5-color humans. Javier is just playing a lot of Phantasmal Images, which I think is a great choice. You're already playing the best humans that are available in Modern, so why not just add some Phantasmal Images to the mix?
Yeah, worth noting that the Phantasmal Image, the Ancient Ziggurat, a key piece of the puzzle to be able to cast it, because the Cavern of Souls and the Unclaimed Territory in play, both naming human, and Phantasmal Image, while it comes into play often as a human, while it's in your hand, it is an illusion, as we see there. All right, there is the Young Pyromancer, from which Gerry Thompson's deck gets its name. A lot of spells available to Gerry Thompson. You can see the advantage bar moving, and one of the challenges that Javier Dominguez faces now is finding ways of getting through damage. That Mantis Rider, one of the few ways that Javier Dominguez has to get over the top of a potential army of tokens coming through, and enough to swing the bar in terms of advantage here, Simon.
Yes, this was the top deck that Javier needed. Gerry was on 8 and looking to stabilize. He had the Reveler, he had the Young Pyromancer already, but now with the Exalted trigger from Noble Hierarch, Mantis Rider actually represented a 2-turn clock.
And a big Faithless Looting there. Gerry had to find a way of removing that Mantis Rider right this turn, because Exalted it enough to mean that he was facing lethal. Managed to find a Lightning Bolt off the Faithless Looting, flashback from his graveyard. That will not be one of the cards that he's discarding here. He desperately needs to get rid of that flyer. If he can kill it off now and then fade the draw step from Javier Dominguez, he may be able to get something going here.
That is a 4. Yes. A 4.
Bedlam River attacking for 4 here. And Gerry content to pass the turn back here. Big draw step for Dominguez. Can he steal this one? And in response to the trigger there's the Lightning Bolt, enough to kill off Mantis Rider. I guess that by waiting for the trigger, he meant that if Javier had drawn a second Mantis Rider and tried to attack with both, he could have killed one, gone to 1, and still been alive, because there would not have been any Exalted going on.
Yes. Exalted can be a bit tricky to play around.
Colligan's Command and Liliana of the Veil in hand for Thompson. And Colligan's Command, a lot of modes on this one. Making players discard cards, destroy artifacts, dealing damage and returning creatures. Each one of those pieces of the puzzle relevant to Gerry Thompson in various different scenarios, alongside the Liliana of the Veil that you see there as well. Kicking things off with a big attack here. Champion of the Parish threatening to get big at some point, but at this point, Gerry likely to have an army of blockers for much of the rest of the game.
2 and discard token.
Yeah, what Gerry would really want is for his Bedlam Reveler to die, so that he can get it back with Colorgan's command. But that's not really how this matchup plays out. There's almost no way for the Reveler to die in combat.
The Bedlam Reveler in this deck, almost any time it gets cast, seems to cost just 2 mana. While it starts off as a big old 8-ball, it costs 1 less to cast for each instant and sorcery in your graveyard. And very, very regularly, Gerry Thompson has a graveyard absolutely jam-packed with instants and sorceries. Thalia's Lieutenant coming down here. Champion of the Parish and Reflector Mage in play. So each of those humans getting +1/+1 counters. But at this point, in some respects, however big those humans are, there is an almost unending supply of elementals to block them. So it's going to be a tough one for Javier to punch through now that he's working off the top of his deck, drawing 1 card a turn and hoping to be able to build a board that way.
Yes, because Gerry, even though he's also only drawing 1 card a turn, he will draw the more impactful cards. He can draw into Revelers, he can draw into Colorgan's command, and he still has Liliana of the Veil. Now that the Hierarch is gone, that will actually also take care of a relevant creature.
Yeah, up until that point, the Hierarch would have been a relatively straightforward sacrifice, but Gerry has maneuvered into a position where he's able to deploy it and have it be removal spell plus or discard spell plus, depending on what is needed for him for the rest of the game. Finds another Faithless Looting here. Kicking it off with that Lightning Bolt and a land, and it looks like Gerry valuing the Lightning Bolt more than the Liliana herself.
Lightning Bolt is also an answer to a top-decked Mantis Rider. The Mantis Riders are, at this stage, the scariest cards, maybe in conjunction with the 1 copy of Keswick Malcontents.
Yeah, Keswick Malcontents, at the moment, the best thing that Gerry can do against it is remove a human in response so that he would only be taking 3 damage. But one way or another, any way that he can stay on at least 1 life, that's good enough. And we actually saw a number of games in the Swiss where Gerry Thompson did drop to exactly 1 point of life before finally turning the corner against these human decks. Not a surprise to see him in single digits for much of this first game.
No, but still, and that's the beautiful part, he is very much favored this game because of how limited Javier's outs are here.
Thompson here, unafraid to get stuck in with Bedlam Reveler.
That's also the reason why we see these attacks. Gerry knows that he's favored, but he also knows that he doesn't have infinite time to just draw out this game. There are some top decks by Javier that would still make him lose the game.
Yeah, the Lightning Bolt to clear a path there. Kind of interesting, Simon, given that we said that it is one of his insurance plans against big top decks on the other side of the battlefield. But I guess that another piece of insurance that he can have is just ending the game sooner.
Yes, if he's threatening to attack for lethal soon,
Yeah, go on.
it also makes it much more difficult for Javier to mount an offense.
So yet another Meddling Mage coming down. We'll find out what that one's named in just a second for you here. It is named Faithless Looting. Faithless Looting, one of those cards that potentially ends up there being kind of 8 of in your opponent's deck as they cast it and then flash it back. The Meddling Mage working just as well on the flashback side of it as the front end, and given that there's one in the graveyard, that a pretty safe name from Javier Dominguez, just trying to desperately contain Gerry Thompson's deck now that it's finally moving into top gear.
Yes, and why would you try to name a random card that might be on the top of Gerry's library when there are flashback cards in the graveyard? You know your Meddling Mage is achieving something here.
So Reflector Mage coming in, it's currently a 3/4, so it's big enough that any blocks that Gerry Thompson throws its way, likely to be chump blocks. I can't imagine that we can see Young Pyromancer getting involved in any combats anytime soon. And
no,
indeed, 1 elemental dies off.
The Young Pyromancer is, of course, too valuable.
Young Pyromancer, in the cycle of powerful 2-drops in the game, you know, you've got your Tarmogoyfs, you've got your Dark Confidants, your Snapcaster Mages. Young Pyromancer right on up there, having done good work in just about every format in which it is legal.
Every creature that's playable in Vintage is definitely up there in the top 10 of powerful cards.
And of course, playing a big role in this second set of quarterfinals, also a key component of the deck of Pascal Viren. Viren, of course, up a game against Andrea Mengucci. We'll bring you updates, and we'll get to see some of that match as we jump between our quarterfinals games soon enough.
If you look at Thompson's hand here, he drew a mountain, and that was exactly what Javier was intending to do by naming Faithless Looting with Meddling Mage. Now he actually has a chance, given that Gerry might just have a few blank draw steps, and Javier can still top deck that Mantis Rider or a Classic Malcontent.
Yeah, Thompson saying that the way that he potentially loses this is by fading a few draw steps, having draw steps where essentially he doesn't draw any relevant cards. He did miss on one draw step, but his following draw step, an absolute belter. Lingering Souls, that's going to generate 2 spirit tokens, 1 elemental. On the flashback, it can do the same again. That's a gigantic addition to Gerry Thompson's board, and in spite of all the creatures that Javier Dominguez has in play, it means that Gerry Thompson has the opportunity to go wide. Now, something that's worth noting here, gradually over this last couple of turns, Javier Dominguez has reached a point where he's got enough humans in play that if he's able to find the singleton copy of Kessig Malcontents in his deck, he could just close this game out from nowhere.
Yes, but that's the only card that wins on the spot for him. Note that Gerry has to pay 4 here.
Fun of?
Oh, did you hear it? Gerry said 1 off? Question mark?
Malcontent.
No, Malcontent would be great. No Malcontent. I'm afraid it's not a Malcontent.
Dominguez there, a little chuckle as Gerry Thompson names exactly the card that he was hoping for. And Dominguez is one of those players that I don't think of him as being a poker face player. He's quite emotional when he's playing, but you know what? That's part of why so many people love watching him play.
He did draw a great card, but the turn after Gerry drew Lingering Souls, it's still something that probably keeps him in the game here, because Gerry will not be able to go on offense, but instead have to make some awkward blocks here.
Flying Vigilance, Haste, 3/3 for 3. Lightning Angel with a slightly smaller back end, but 1 off the cost. Very potent card from Khans of Tarkir. And there's a human monk on the back of that Mantis. Creature type does not pay any attention to the fact that there is the Mantis itself. It's all about the rider.
This is going much longer than I expected. Somehow Thompson used his removal spells at a point where he was like very clearly ahead, but then somehow he discarded the Liliana. He doesn't have much ways left to generate card advantage here.
Yeah, a lot of the card advantage from Gerry Thompson's deck comes either in the form of Bedlam Reveler drawing you cards, or flashback, meaning that you're getting multiple uses out of spells, and then I guess the Young Pyromancer itself generating tokens. But the generation of tokens here, not as much advantage as maybe we've seen it in some other games. He's having to gradually build a board rather than being able to get something decisive very quickly.
Yep, and every turn that Gerry is not attacking is 1 more turn for Javier to find a lethal Classic Malcontents or another Mantis Rider, which would also be great.
Kitesail Freebooter, another flyer. This one a 1/2, so still enough to be solid against the spirits that are going on. Mantis Rider, there is a temptation for Gerry here to throw 3 tokens in front of it just to deal with it, and it looks like that's what he's going to do here. So this opens the door for the 3rd Mantis Rider from Javier Dominguez to also be lethal next turn, in addition to Kessig Malcontent. So by my count, he has 3 lethal top decks that he can find here.
Because the Freebooter adds the 4th point of damage in the air.
And just a land on a pass here for Gerry Thompson. And there is the Mantis Rider. The exact set of blocks that Gerry Thompson used the previous turn, trying to get 1 Mantis Rider off the board, meaning that he does not have enough blockers on this subsequent turn. Worth noting, I guess, that he would only have had 1 extra turn anyway, because he'd have had to throw lots of creatures under the bus in order to try and find a way out in that game one. But a little bit of a smile there from Javier Dominguez. It took him a long while to finally pin down this first top 8 at the Pro Tour. Lots of 9th place finishes for him prior to that. But now that he's here, he does not want to give up anything, our World Championship finalist. We'll see more from him and, of course, more from our other match in the quarterfinals very shortly. But first, these messages.
Rivals of Ixalan is available in stores. Stake your claim. The Golden City of Araska has been found. Build your forces with new vampires, merfolk, pirates, and dinosaurs, and gain the city's blessing. Visit rivalsofixalan.com to find out more. Looking for a challenge? Magic Online offers monthly limited and constructed events, which lead to the yearly Magic Online Championship. Download Magic Online at mtgo.com and start earning the points you need to enter.
Hello and welcome back to this second set of quarterfinals here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by Simon Gertzen as we get a chance to see how the Humans decks fare on the other side of our bracket here. And you know what? Javier Dominguez Humans was able to win game one in a nice set of draws in the back end there. Multiple Mantis Riders gradually getting things done for him against Gerry Thompson's list full of removal. We're going to get a chance to look across and see our other matchup here. Andrea Mengucci dropped his first game with Humans against Pascal Viren, and based on the feedback that I got from Vieren before the match, that potentially pretty big for him. He not too confident about his game one against this Humans list with his red-blue control deck principally. It also runs Young Pyromancer, but that's about where the comparison with Gerry Thompson's deck starts and ends. His is a list full of red and blue spells. He's got some counter magic. He's got Thing in the Ice to potentially bounce a lot of creatures. And then Young Pyromancer, one of the ways that he can kind of clean up at the end of the game. We'll see whether or not he uses that option or indeed the Thing in the Ice to close things out. Looking at his opening hand here, it's all about setup for Pascal Viren. He's got a Lightning Bolt, he's got an Ancestral Vision, but he can potentially work for something fairly big if he can get that Ancestral Vision suspended.
But Mengucci kept a hand that was quite the gamble. He played a Cavern on Humans, but absolutely needed to draw a second land to cast his spells, and he didn't.
Yeah, this hand potentially an absolute monster against what Pascal Viren has going on. Thalia's Lieutenant, meaning that casting spells much harder for Viren, so if he's short on mana, that could be a problem. And then Kitesail Freebooter being able to snipe... Thalia Guardian Thraben stopping spells, and then Kitesail Freebooter being able to snipe cards from Pascal's hand. And finally, the Lieutenant, meaning that Andrea presenting a pretty big clock. Missing these land drops is really, really tough, and we could have a very, very quick game here, Simon.
Yes, you gave the reason for keeping the hand Not sure if I agree, but I believe it was after a mulligan to 6 with a scry. So Andrea had pretty good chances of finding a land or an ether vial. But look at what's happening here. Pascal realizes that this is a moment to play land destruction.
Yeah, Field of Ruin, it's kind of land selection almost. You're changing that Cavern of Souls into a basic plains. And the tough thing for Andrea Mengucci is that one-color lands mean that there will be cards in his hand that are going to be very problematic to cast. Obviously, at the moment, everything problematic to cast without enough mana simply to be able to do anything. But if it works out that Andrea Mengucci draws another one of his basic lands here, he could be very much stuck. Noble Hierarch there, the draw. That's exactly the kind of situation that we're talking about. If it had been a Cavern of Souls, he'd have been able to get things going. As it stands, though, Andrea Mengucci, he's just going to go straight on to game 3. And 2 games down against this blue-red Pyromancer deck before sideboarding's even happened. He's going to have to put 3 together on the bounce, and that's a big ask for this Humans deck.
Yeah, that's going to be very, very hard against the blue-red deck that is packing so much removal, even Anger of the Gods out of the sideboard. That's not going to be easy for Mengucci.
Very, very tough luck there on Mengucci as these players go to sideboards. It's not until game 3 that sideboarding happens. We're going to get to have another game between Javier Dominguez and Gerry Thompson before there's any sideboarding going on. And sideboards, obviously very, very important in Modern. We will get a chance to talk about them soon enough. But first up, it's a matter of whether or not Gerry Thompson can maybe get back to parity and in this matchup here, having dropped game 1, kicking things off with Inquisition of Kozilek and seeing, well, a land with a lot of mana sources from Javier Dominguez here. He's got lands, he's got Ether Vial, he's got Noble Hierarch, and the only threat in that hand is a Mantis Rider.
Yeah, I didn't see that at first because it has a similar color scheme to the Horizon Canopy. So I thought he kept the hand without any threats. But of course, with the Mantis Rider, that can come down on turn 2 if Gerry doesn't kill the Hierarch. That's a pretty decent hand. The 2 Horizon Canopies actually mean that you are not very likely to flood out with this hand.
It's interesting, Gerry Thompson, he does have another discard spell, and that's really going to color what he chooses to take on the first turn here. Takes the Noble Hierarch, and that means that there's not going to be a turn 2 Mantis Rider, and there's a potential he can just take the Mantis Rider before it can get cast here.
In general, I like not taking Ether Vial because you really want to deal with your opponent's threats one by one. You don't also want to bother with all these Ether Vials.
Young Pyromancer here coming down on turn 2. Gerry knows that he's got at least one more turn before he needs to worry about Mantis Rider. And Mantis Rider is one of the premium threats in Javier Dominguez's deck against him in terms of literally taking his life total from 20 to 0. It's not as disruptive as some of the other things that humans can do, but what it can do is simply reduce that 20 in 3-point and maybe even 4-point chunks. Fatal push, the pickup there for Gerry Thompson. He's got the Pyromancer in play. That means that everything that he's doing from here on out is going to be generating tokens. Manamorphose there doing so very efficiently indeed. Effectively a free spell for him, draws him a card, generates the mana that it costs, generates an elemental. Very efficient use of cards here. He's just going to have to hope that he can spend that mana on something useful. Inquisition of Kozilek. Reflector Mage, the additional pickup since last Gerry Thompson saw Javier Dominguez's hand.
Take Mantis.
The Mantis Rider being taken there. No massive surprises there.
Mantis Rider won game 1 for Javier Dominguez. Reflector Mage is just barely playable after sideboarding. There are some nice tricks you can pull. For example, bouncing a Bedlam Reveler with the trigger on the stack. Of course, only if you have Ether Vial. But ultimately, definitely the correct choice by Gerry.
So it's 18-18, right?
18 off. Yep.
The players just making sure they got the life totals correct. It's all damage inflicted by Gerry Thompson here. Some of it on himself with a Blood Crypt. More of it coming through from the Young Pyromancer. Getting into the red zone on a rare occasion where it feels confident in being able to attack. Gerry, having seen Javier Dominguez's hand, knows that he does not need to worry about Ether Vial, throwing a blocker in and maybe stymieing his plans that way.
Javier has two options here. He could start drawing with the Horizon Canopies. He just wants to find something, otherwise he will just lose. However, bouncing Young Pyromancer with Reflector Mage is quite attractive.
Yeah, if you do bounce it here, because of the Reflector Mage's text, it will be a little bit of time before Young Pyromancer comes back. And of course, if it worked out that Gerry was trying to build a plan with multiple Young Pyromancers, well, he'd have to wait on them too. Also, as a 3-cost creature, it's moderately more safe from Fatal Push than many of the other things that could be deployed by this Humans deck.
I think Gerry's actually contemplating to Fatal Push end of turn. Maybe he also had to check the exact wording on Revolt, because it says a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn.
Yeah, it does not need to be that something has died. It just needs to have moved zones from the battlefield. So the fact that that Young Pyromancer bounced, good enough that Fatal Push able to deal with Reflector Mage now. And realistically, it may have been a little bit of time if he'd had to wait on a different occasion. But yes, we see it. 2 copies of Young Pyromancer in hand. This is the situation that the Reflector Mage so good against. Even if it had worked out that Gerry had enough lands to cast them both, this turn, they are stranded there. However, if anything, Dominguez's hand stranded in a different kind of fashion here. He's really going to have to rely on the top of his deck and those Horizon Canopies to make sure that he can get any kind of velocity in this game.
And of course, Gerry does not cast Bedlam Reveler here. I believe he would have had the 4 spells in the graveyard so that he would reach 8 mana effectively. But with 2 Young Pyromancers in your hand, you really want to take at least 1 more turn until you Reveler.
So Gerry here looking on as another threat comes down. The Champion of the Parish, on the face of things, pretty innocuous, the 1/1 for 1, but it grows very large in this Humans deck if it comes down on turn 1. Coming down in this stage in the game, Gerry knows that the most that it's growing per turn is +1/+1, and he's already got elementals to block it, so not necessarily too scary.
No, on this game, just like game 1, will not be 1 on the ground. And Javier really needs some really nice draws here to make something happen.
So Gerry Thompson passing the turn there, not choosing to get stuck in with those elementals. Ether Vial active. There is the potential, I guess, for something to pop down there. I don't think that he knows exactly what's in Dominguez's hand at this point. Looks like we may see Phantasmal Image copying a Champion of the Parish here.
That's not too bad. Then you would have 2 creatures growing, maybe outgrowing.
Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. That does put a little bit of a crimp on much of what Gerry Thompson has going on.
But it also shows that Javier has other plans for the Phantasmal Image. Probably wants to wait for something more impactful. I can think of Thalia's Lieutenant and Mantis Rider as being quite nice cards. Here we see Bedlam Reveler, which is in Gerry's hand, but of course Phantasmal Image does not only copy your own creatures, it also copies your opponent's creatures if you want, and who doesn't like to draw 3 cards?
I can't think of anyone that doesn't like to draw 3 cards. Terrifying maniacs do not like to draw 3 cards, and I'm pretty sure that neither of these players constitute one of them. I would say actually this top 8 just full of, like, this is the nice guy top 8 full of people that I know there's players all around the world rooting on all of these players because they're some of the friendliest, nicest players that you'll meet on the Pro Tour. Javier Dominguez getting gigantic cheers for making his first top 8. Gerry Thompson, again, huge cheers from much of the crowd for getting another top 8, of course, looking to potentially get a second Pro Tour trophy.
Keep playing?
Yep. I'll stop you if I have to.
Another Cavernous Souls coming down here for Javier Dominguez. There are some matchups where being able to make those humans uncounterable is a big deal, but it's largely mana fixing in this matchup at least. Thalia's Lieutenant coming down to join Thalia herself. And Champion of the Parish getting fairly large at this point. And it may be that rather than that Champion of the Parish trying to beat its way through a never-ending stream of elementals, that it's now on Bedlam Reveler duty, trying to keep that Bedlam Reveler honest, trying to keep it from getting stuck in too much.
We will see now what Javier is planning to do with Phantasmal Image.
Okay. Yeah.
So I discard my hand and draw 3 cards, that's correct?
Yeah.
So it's one. Patient. Discard this, draw 3 cards.
Javier there being very clear about exactly what Bedlam Reveler does. Possibly as much for himself as for his opponent. Obviously, Gerry knows Bedlam Reveler very well at this point. He's been playing with it all weekend and doing very, very well with it. Thank you very much. This might be the first one that Javier's copied in anger in our feature match area at any point this weekend, though.
Javier not really drawing creatures for 3 mana, so his Ether Vial has not been doing a lot of work. He put it up to 3 when he was still looking at his hand that had a Mantis Rider and Reflector Mage. Well, not quite, but the Mantis Rider. But he somehow then started drawing only 2 and 1 drops.
We see land and spells for Thompson. He's got quite a lot of lands in play, but unlike the humans deck, he does have ways of using it. He can sometimes have those turns where he does want to be playing spell, or even potentially more than 2 spells in a turn. The prowess on Bedlam Reveler triggering. I saw Gerry Thompson attacking for a crazy amount with 2 Bedlam Revelers in the Swiss of this tournament. Colligan's Command, an easy 2 for 1, and Liliana of the Veil often achieving that too.
No Faithless Lootings to be seen. Maybe Gerry doesn't have the full amount in after sideboarding, although it should still be a very good card in this matchup.
You can see there Gerry having to pay 2 for that Thoughtseize, because we do have Thalia, Garden of Thraben in play. A temptation, of course, to remove it with Colligan's Command, but I think that the discipline of waiting on it probably working out very well. Also worth noting that the Bedlam Reveler on Javier Dominguez side of the board, while very good at drawing him 3 cards, it will die to any targeted effect, and we know that Gerry has quite a lot of them, so it's not necessarily quite as secure as the 3/4 that Gerry's working with.
Yeah, so this is the one big downside of Phantasmal Image. Still probably the best clone ever printed.
Yeah, I mean, depending on whether or not you consider the artwork of Morphling to be suggesting that it's a clone. Morphling, a shapeshifter, but not quite a clone in the classic sense.
5.
Swings coming in for Gerry Thompson here. 5 points of damage thanks to the prowess on the Reveler. Naturally a 3/4 horror, Devil Horror. And the fact that it is a horror, if he ends up playing against Pascal Viren, could be very relevant, because that means it can't get bounced by Thing in the Ice.
Yeah. Creature types being relevant all over the feature match area.
One card.
Okay.
Horrors versus humans, our next duel deck. You heard it here first.
Javier lining up attacks now that the Reveler is tapped. Also an interesting choice if you feel like you have to do something against Liliana, or if that is just something you have to ignore.
15 points of damage still needed to take Gerry Thompson out of this game. It's a slightly unusual and possibly concerning place for Javier Dominguez to be, that his life total lower than that of his opponent, considering the way that this matchup typically seems to go. Gerry happy to throw 3 elementals under the bus. He didn't really pay anything for them in terms of getting them into play. Each and every spell that he's casting is generating 2 elementals, and this is just what makes getting through for any kind of damage really messy for Javier Dominguez. He's going to have to find a flyer if he wants to really trouble that life total of Thompson's. A second Bedlam Reveler is a fantastic draw there for Gerry Thompson. He's able to take what was essentially a nothing hand and potentially get a lot going here. Yes, he's got that Colligan's Command. He may want to fire that off first, given how much mana he has available to him. But this is an exciting spot for Gerry Thompson here, as he's looking to try and shore things up, get things to even Stevens, 1 game apiece going into game 3 in the sideboarded games here in the quarterfinals of Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan.
2 damage, shatter, 10 points.
Kills Thalia, destroys an Ether Vial. Pretty good value on that Colligan's Command, especially given that he really does want to be casting Bedlam Reveler this turn. Its cost reduced to just 2 and draws a full 3 cards, not having to discard any. That's the kind of value that Javier Dominguez deck struggled to keep up with.
Yes, and Gerry is now clearly on offense here. Once again, he cast 2 spells. This time the Reveler only grew by 1 though. And wow, even Young Pyromancer is getting in there.
Yeah, when Young Pyromancer's attacking, that's a point where Javier Dominguez has to feel like he's in a rough spot. He trades it for a Champion of the Parish. A pretty bold attack there, I think.
It's a bold attack, but as you can tell, Javier is clearly losing here. He's also just... Ooh.
Fun.
So many Bedlam Revelers, and that was a nice pickup, and he's picked up another copy of Phantasmal Image, so we could see the same play yet again from Javier Dominguez. He plays Champion of the Parish first. That means that there's only one card left in his hand. It's yet another Phantasmal Image. It's going to be Reveler on Reveler action here. Some of them illusions, some of them original Devil Horrors, all of them drawing cards for these players. Javier Dominguez, this is the most cards he's ever drawn with this Humans deck. He must be loving it.
Yeah, this is basically when we were talking about Collected Company and how this deck does run out of steam. If you have a bunch of 2-mana Bedlam Revelers, it does become a lot better.
All right, some targeted effects. That's what Gerry Thompson's looking for. He's got Faithless Looting, he's got Lingering Souls, he's got Blood Moon, and he's just picked up a Swamp. It feels to me like Faithless Looting, the order of the day here. There's a couple of cards in that hand that are better than the others.
But Blood Moon is actually quite impactful, I believe. Gerry shattered the Ether Vial, and I don't spot a basic land on Javier's side of the battlefield.
Picks up 2 Faithless Lootings with his Faithless Lootings. There will be Faithless Lootings for days here from Gerry Thompson. Surely within that he can find an appropriate mix of spells. Discards a Lingering Souls. That's where we wanted it to be. Casts another Faithless Looting. Dig, dig, dig. Finds a Dreadbore. Finds a Lightning Bolt. All right, clearing a path at this point should not prove too difficult for Thompson. And in so doing, he is generating a lot of prowess triggers for the 2 Bedlam Revelers that he has in play.
It must be good.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, I think so.
Discards a Faithless Looting and a Dreadbore.
Yeah.
And it looks like the writing on the wall there, Javier Dominguez realizing quite what Gerry Thompson's got going here. Just a mountain of removal spells, clearing a path, 2 Bedlam Revelers, and with Dominguez on just 7 life, that was enough to square things up. 1 game apiece between Javier Dominguez and Gerry Thompson. Good games from him, and those guys will be going to their sideboards. Now, of course, with Gerry and indeed Javier going to their sideboards, we get a chance to look across at our other match. We didn't really see anything of the match between Pascal Viren and Andrea Mengucci thus far. Game 1, that was off camera while we were watching our Game 1 on the other side of things. Game 2, barely a game, and that means that Pascal Viren starting things off in these sideboarded games, a full 2 games up. He's got to find 1 win in the next 3 games, and he had said that he felt like after sideboarding his deck only gets better. The red-blue list, he's got to play a tapped Steam Vents on turn 1. That means he can't suspend Ancestral Vision and has to look on as Andrea Mengucci gets the first play of the game, and that play is Thalia, and Thalia very good against his very spell-heavy deck.
This is the best start that Andrea Mengucci can have. If Pascal doesn't deal with Thalia, he is paying 2 mana for, well, for half of his deck, basically. He's playing cantrips, he's playing Serum Visions, Opts, Lightning Bolts. So even though he has removal options for Thalia, this is a big tempo hit.
Worth noting that this hand from Andrea Mengucci, it wasn't just about the Thalia. Kitesail Freebooter coming down, that's going to take a spell out of Pascal Viren's hand until it's killed off. I believe that there's another copy of Kitesail Freebooter. There's also 2 copies of Meddling Mage in Andrea Mengucci's hand. Now, Meddling Mage and Kitesail Freebooter, they may not have the same profession, but they are best of buds in an unlikely buddy comedy. Meddling Mage coming down after Kitesail Freebooter, that can strand another card or 2 in Pascal Viren's hand. And this makes life very difficult indeed for Pascal Viren to get any kind of velocity going in this game. Picking up a land there, very important for him. He does need to try and dig his way out of this, and the only way he's going to be able to do that is by paying extra for all of his spells. But if Andrea Mengucci continues on this vein, then we may find him fighting back here.
I agree, Tim. The 3rd land for Pascal is definitely valuable, but the Thalia is still a huge problem. If you have to pay 4 mana for Electrolyze, that's actually critical.
No, I didn't. I just suspended. Okay.
Just confirming that while Thalia does make spells cost more to cast, suspending, paying the ability, which costs a single blue, that still works just fine, even under Thalia, making sure that everything fair and above board in our Sunday play here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. Thalia Guardian of Thraben, a very potent threat, and of course a human, pretty important to this humans list of Andrea Mengucci's.
Ancestral Vision is Peter Viren's version of Bedlam Reveler. drawing 3 cards with the powerful sorcery, but of course it doesn't come with a 3/4 prowess body.
Fearless attacks here from Andrea Mengucci. Thalia unlikely to be blocked here, and to be perfectly honest, if Pascal Viren's able to get any kind of blocking going on with his Young Pyromancer against, I mean, he can't block the flyer anyway, but even if he could be blocking, does he want to be losing that Pyromancer? He's got so many different ways that things are going poorly for him in this game. His Electrolyze now being taken by Kitesail Freebooter the turn before. It could potentially be cast. This is just Nightmare Town for the Belgian.
Yes, the one good thing he has going for him is that he has a Pyromancer and that he's not under so much pressure. He is taking 4 next turn unless Thalia's Lieutenant comes down.
Yeah, modest hits coming through from Andrea Mengucci, who's kind of got the control draw of the potential human draws that can come along. These are post-sideboarded games, so there will potentially have been some little adjustments made. In terms of how much change there's been to these decks, uncertain that we're going to see sort of big sea changes in the overall plans of how these decks win. It's more just making spot adjustments in order to make sure that you've got the right arrangement of threats. Pascal Viren, he's been on the Pro Tour for a long while, but this is very first top 8. Looking on as Meddling Mage comes down from Mengucci, cracks a fetch land in response.
And Mengucci has the information from the last freebooter, so he could, for example, name Cryptic Command just to not allow Pascal to tap his team down.
Yeah, Andrea Mengucci, he's just had Pascal Viren in a headlock this game from basically the very start of the game, making those spells cost more, making sure that those cards in hand are getting either stripped away or stranded there with a Meddling Mage. And this is really, really difficult situation for Pascal Viren to draw out of, because I don't believe that there are too many mass removal spells available to Viren. He has Anger of the Gods in his sideboard, and I would guess that this is a matchup where it comes in. But right now, even if he were to draw it, he doesn't have the right colors of mana to be able to cast it.
He's also missing his second red, absolutely. There's a Field of Ruin, so given time, he can do a lot of things. It's just critical. I don't think he will have that much time.
Yeah, points coming in the air from the Kitesail Freebooter attacking. If it gets joined by the likes of a Mantis Rider, then we're going to see that live total absolutely tumbling down here. And in the meantime, the disruption is there from Andrea Mengucci. He does have the ability to make anything that Pascal Viren's trying to put together take a little bit longer. And Mengucci, he's tested this matchup. He has a feel for what the key important cards are. And if he happened to see an end-of-turn Field of Ruin for a mountain, it may well be that he would recognize that he has to be thinking about this Anger of the Gods. Three damage to each creature and exiling those creatures. The exile not the most relevant element of the ability in this matchup, but 3 damage enough to kill off his entire team here. More copies of Ancestral Vision being suspended here. So Pascal Viren, he's going to get the opportunity to jump in and draw a lot of cards relatively soon. The question is, though, how many of those cards is he going to be able to cast on any given turn with that Thalia in play, with Meddling Mage stopping various cards that he potentially could be even drawing into from being cast?
If you take a look at Mengucci's hand, he even has the chance to name Ancestral Visions with Meddling Mage. So when they come off suspend, they actually can't be cast.
Yeah, Meddling Mage, if it can see what's coming, one of the most potent cards in the game, one of the most potent 2-drops in the game. Originally designed by Chris Pikula, of course, and we see the Chris Pikula artwork for the Invitational winners card there, babbling away and stopping people from casting spells. A very popular player and a very popular card, originally printed in Planeshift in 2001, quite a while ago now.
Lightning bolt.
Okay, Andrea is trying to just not allow Pascal any kind of removal spells, and he knows that Ancestral Visions will very likely be too late. So Lightning Bolt is the choice. I like this choice a lot. Look at the beatdown that's commencing here.
Yeah, Thalia's Lieutenant turning all of those relatively small and unexciting looking creatures into powerful beaters here. Big swings coming through, and Pascal Viren's life total is going to be going down substantially. He casts an Opt, which gets him both a Scry, a Draw, and another Elemental. So there's value there. I mean, you're paying 2 for it, but it's still not a terrible deal, except for the fact that he needs to have a great deal if he's going to get back into this game.
I agree. He needs to find Anger of the Gods and a second red source. See, he has a Field of Ruin, so he can, with 5 lands in play, I think he can generate the red source.
Just the 2 copies of Anger of the Gods.
There's still a Thalia in play. No, he has the red source. He's really just digging for Anger of the Gods.
So a roast the pickup here for Pascal Viren. He can potentially string together a couple of spells here, kill off a few creatures. A real shame for him that the Thalia's Lieutenant came down the turn that it did. It means that some of his burn-based removal not looking quite as exciting against this now slightly larger creatures on the Italian side of the table. Unclaimed Territory the pickup alongside Ether Vial. So to be honest, all the threats that Mengucci has going are already on the battlefield unless this Horizon Canopy can do something about that.
And now it's happening again. The human stack is kind of flooding out. It's drawing too many lands. Ether Vial is more or less useless. And now Pascal actually can start casting Cryptic Commands.
And Cryptic Command, you know, we saw it in Lorwyn Block and we've seen it in Modern for the entire history of the format. Just a wildly powerful spell. There, Pascal Viren using it as Fog Plus, tapping down his opponent's creatures, buying him a huge amount of additional time. And with time, he is going to get a chance to start casting these Ancestral Visions. And this is where he can really get back in this game. He can find the additional cards that he needs. And when you're talking about digging into a sideboard card that's a 1 of, that's a 2 of, this is how you do it. You draw all of these additional cards, and that's potentially going to mean that he can find a way of dealing with what... I mean, I don't think that Andrea Mengucci in the early turns could have come up with a much better hand than the one he started with. Viren here has a couple of copies of Lightning Bolt alongside Vendilion Click, Thing in the Ice, and Roast. Unfortunately for him, Lightning Bolt was named by Mengucci in prescient fashion with that Meddling Mage. So the way that he sequences things here, he's going to have to use Roast first if he wants to unlock those Lightning Bolts, and he is still a little bit hampered on red mana.
I think the main issue is still Thalia. Imagine if Thalia wasn't there, he wouldn't have had to tap the Field of Ruins. He could go Roast into Roast or something like that, or Roast into Electrolyze, and suddenly this board would go down in flames very, very quickly. Instead, he has to make pretty awkward choices just to free up his spells, and he's paying the Thalia tax 2 or 3 times each turn.
Yeah, and he really has to be killing the other threats. So sort of, at the moment on 5 life, he's facing 4 in the air just from Kitesail freebooters.
Yeah, and one of those, I assume, will get Lightning Bolted.
A cheeky attack here from Pascal Viren. Young Pyromancer, there was no way on earth that it was going to be blocking, so he might as well get in the 2 points of damage with it. Andrea Mengucci on 11. It's going to take a little bit of killing here. Reflector Mage the pickup for Mengucci, though. How does that change this board?
It's a fine draw, but it's not exciting. What Mengucci needed here was a Mantis Rider, just to have more evasive pressure. It would have been Lightning Bolted, but he would have gotten in for 4 damage, and then I don't know how Pascal would have come back.
When those 3 lands got tapped, I'm sure Pascal Viren a little afraid. Worth noting that there are draws that the humans deck can have with Cavern of Souls that make any kind of counter magic from Pascal Viren pretty poor, and I would imagine that that's enough reason that when it came to sideboarding, he may well have adjusted the counter magic down just a notch. In this instance, if he had a counter, he would be able to use it, but he does not. Just looks on as Reflector Mage comes down, and Mengucci here, carefully figuring out what he wants to bounce, does go with the Young Pyromancer.
Pascal's deck is actually not super heavy on counter magic anyway. He's playing a very proactive game plan. So his most impressive counterspell is Cryptic Command, but that of course has a lot of different modes as well.
So Lightning Bolt, killing off a Kite Cell Freebooter, unlocking a Roast. And we're in this weird spot here where every removal spell that Pascal Viren plays seems to unlock another removal spell or two. So it's not as if they're really even costing him cards. What they're really costing him is mana, thanks to that Thalia tax each and every turn. 3 life left for Pascal Viren. Can he find a way of pulling himself out of this one? Draws a Snapcaster Mage, that another pretty potent card in this matchup, getting him the removal spell he wants. And I see that advantage bar, for the first time in quite a while in this game, beginning to swing in the favor of Pascal Viren. Talk us through it, Simon.
I think Pascal is doing it. He has, despite Thalia, whittled down Andrea's board. He has these ground blockers, and he doesn't really care if the elementals stay around or trade with an advantage. As long as he doesn't take damage, his hand has everything he needs to get there in the end. If you kill another ground creature here, you have Lightning Bolt for the freebooter. Now you just have to make sure that you don't lose to Mantis Rider.
It's a very familiar scenario for those of us that were watching the game with Javier Dominguez and Gerry Thompson, that conveniently against this humans deck, one thing that is relatively straightforward is predicting how much damage that they're able to output, especially when you've got blockers on the ground. Mantis Rider becomes the premium threat that can potentially be used to do much of anything, and Lightning Bolt there dealing with Kite Cell Freebooter, unlocking Electrolyze. Electrolyze itself, it's going to cost 4 to deal 2 damage, split how you like and draw a card. 2 damage, enough to kill off Thalia though, and I can definitely see a temptation to do that, finally making it so that Pascal Viren can start stringing spells together. Ultimately goes for a Roast to deal with Thalia. That means that he's got 1 mana left. He gets to suspend Ancestral Vision as well. Everything coming up Viren here. He just needs to hope he can fade a draw step or 2, and he could be right in. This Ancient Ziggurat, the draw for Andrea Mengucci. That, a whole lot of air for him. He's got Ziggurat in hand. Ether Vial plus 4 lands means he just doesn't need any mana whatsoever. And these creatures coming in, yes, they're going to likely get intercepted by these elemental tokens. That's not achieving too much on this battlefield, especially considering that Pascal Viren here, he could potentially get a thing in the ice down and transform it very quickly indeed.
This was the turn where Andrea needed to draw Mantis Rider, because now Pascal is untapping. He's going to have 10, 11 cards in hand, and there's a Vendilion Click he's holding. And Vendilion Click is actually tremendous at keeping Pascal alive against Mantis Rider, even trading with it.
So, unsurprisingly, Pascal Viren, having drawn all of these additional cards, is in pretty good shape all of a sudden. He's drawn into an Anger of the Gods, so if he wants to, he can clear the board of what it stands now. He doesn't necessarily need to go too fast on that, though, because he also has 2 copies of Young Pyromancer. If he wants to, he can choose to flood the board with creatures, make it difficult for Andrea Mengucci to get a useful attack in if it's not in the air, and still potentially have a Vendilion Click to trade with a Mantis Rider, even if it comes down.
I think that's a smart play here. Casting that Anger of the Gods when your 2 Young Pyromancers are still in your hand just makes a lot more sense than going for the Pyromancers, and then you don't really want to anger anymore.
Pascal Viren, just, it's crazy when you look at the way that this game is played out. He was so far behind, but now he's there with a full grip of cards, watching as Andrea Mengucci draws, plays an Ether Vial for the turn, shields very much down for the Italian. This is, it's the sort of deck that looks like it can't deal damage all that quickly, Pascal Viren's, but actually, look at this. He's playing a Vendilion Click. He's using it on himself. He's not too worried about the 1 card left in Andrea Mengucci's hand, and he's going to be able to actually present quite the clock very, very quickly here.
Yes, if he finds, for example, Lightning Bolt, then he has a backup for Mantis Rider and can close out the game faster.
I believe that Snapcaster Mage also an option available to Pascal Viren. That representing still more damage for him, as he does have Lightning Bolt in the graveyard, I believe.
Yeah, that's both a great backup and a good aggro option here. Mengucci needs a miracle off the top.
And he finds a Cavern of Souls. There's the handshake. Pascal Viren does it in 3. Just incredible work from the Belgian. He got into the top 8 here, undefeated. Quite a few draws, but no losses for the Belgian. And he's continuing that streak in our top 8 as he advances to our semi-finals. And we get a chance to see who's going to join him as we head back to our match between Javier Dominguez and Gerry Thompson. So we are now in sideboarded games for Dominguez and Thompson. Each of these players have picked up a single game win thus far. That meaning that they're going to have to find 2 wins somewhere in these remaining 3 sideboarded games. How much do you anticipate this matchup really changing after sideboarding?
There's going to be a bit of change because actually the human deck does have sideboard cards. They're just not what we're used to. They're not these kind of really specialized spells, but they are different kinds of humans that are aimed at playing against control strategies and to go for a longer game.
Yeah, we see both Zathrid Necromancer and a copy of Sin Collector in hand for Javier Dominguez post-board. Neither of those troubling the main deck. Both potential options for Thompson if he's looking to take a slightly more expensive threat. There is Thalia in play, though. That one, Thalia in hand, though. That's one of those cards. We saw how good it is against these spell-heavy strategies. I can imagine it also being a strong temptation for Gerry Thompson here.
Yeah, the difficult choice here is that Thalia is more mana-intensive to get rid of when it comes down. On the other hand, cards like the Necromancer, they generate value for Javier. So you really have to look at your hand and say which one of these cards is scarier.
As things stand, Javier Dominguez kicking things off with Ether Vials. That means that at some point he's going to be able to make that hand explode onto the battlefield at instant speed, tapping those Ether Vials, generating the ability to put creatures onto the battlefield. If Gerry has a follow-up discard spell or 2 here, that could be kind of nice, but it looks like it's largely red spells he's working with. Bedlam Reveler counting as a great discard spell on yourself, likewise Faithless Looting, but we're not in the Ken Yukihira zone here. This is much more about trying to get things going in other fashions. And Faithless Looting does find a copy of Thoughtseize for Gerry Thompson here. He discards one of the Bedlam Revelers. Lingering Souls, always the easiest discard in this deck. And here comes that Thoughtseize to take another card out of Javier Dominguez's hand here. And that meaning that these Ether Vials really limited in their potential, because once Javier is just drawing 1 card a turn and potentially he's got 2 Ether Vials in play, they're not operating at full potential.
Yeah, this is great. Gerry really stripping the key cards of Javier's sideboard strategy out of his hand. Of course, Sin Collector is still a playable card, but it's only a 2/1 human that Gerry will most likely block with an elemental token.
Yeah, it will be able to exile an instant or sorcery from Gerry's hand if it can make it as far as play, and realistically that is an option this turn. The fact that it's a black-white creature where we've seen other colors be cast earlier on, just not a big deal. This is a deck that runs more lands that tap 4 or 5 different colors than we've seen since, you know, the days of Quick and Toast.
4.
4 cards in hand for Gerry Thompson here, and Javier Dominguez has got to realize that he's facing a bit of an uphill struggle here. Based on his own hand, he knows that he's got not too much going on.
Phantasmal Image.
It is an illusion, yeah.
Actually names Illusion with the second land that he puts into play there. And I kind of like that. It means that he does have the opportunity to cast Phantasmal Image if he needs to, because it is an illusion rather than being a human.
Which instant or sorcery do you take? That's a nice hand by Gerry. Of course, having double Reveler is actually a little bit of a downside because you know that you will be forced to discard one of them. However, Gerry, in one of the interviews we did with him, said, you know, you really want to draw it, and if you're forced to discard one, that's still fine. Actually, you want one in your graveyard to get it back with Kolaghan's command. So this kind of chaining of your resources is quite important.
Well, Kitesell Freebooter took a shot at instant speed after Gerry had drawn, being put into play with Ether Vial. Ultimately, a bit of a miss there, though, as it was just a land picked up by Gerry Thompson. Though, I guess that, do you mind too much if it works out that you're missing with your discard spells, if the corollary to that is that Gerry's not got very many spells to work with?
It still feels bad somehow, but of course you're happy that your opponent does not have, for example, 3 powerful spells in his hand and you can only take one of them.
Now, worth noting, of course, that there is both Faithless Looting and that copy of Lingering Souls in the graveyard. So it's not as if Gerry Thompson is going to be getting no value from the Young Pyromancer that he just played. It's just a matter of, from his hand, it's all Bedlam Revelers all the time. And right now, those Bedlam Revelers still a little bit fiddly to cast. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 spells in the graveyard right now, going to mean that those Bedlam Revelers currently costing 4. And to be honest, it's once they get down to costing 2 that they get really exciting.
Yeah, but if you play a land here and you decide the rest of your hand is not worth keeping around, I think a Bedlam Reveler and a Blackleaf Cliffs are very reasonable discards. Then I could totally see Thompson go for the first Reveler here.
Let's see what Gerry chooses to play out. He does go for the Reveler. Discards the remainder of his hand. Draws 3 new cards. And finds Lingering Souls number 2, and indeed the lands. That means that he will be able to cast it from hand before flashing it back. Just passes the turn back to Javier Dominguez here. This is another one of those situations, as we spoke about kind of at the start of this match, about how Gerry Thompson, he can very easily find himself on the back foot in terms of life totals in the early and mid game. And in fact, there are plenty of games where Gerry would go down to low single digits before he really took control. But once he does have control, he can pretty decisively close out games. And you know what? That's the reason that even though on the board it's relatively close in terms of life totals, Gerry is down. But somehow or other, that means that Gerry still has the advantage. Matchup-wise, he's in good spot. His graveyard's got lots of gas going on, and he did just draw 3 cards with Bedlam Reveler.
I think what needs to happen here is that Gerry needs to draw... that Javier needs to draw Phantasmal Image again. Phantasmal Image has been keeping him in the game whenever there was a Bedlam Reveler around, so that would be the card I would be most hoping for.
10?
Yes.
Yeah, at the moment, it's all about the air forces, as Gerry does a great job of locking down the ground with his 1 copy of Young Pyromancer. Casting another Lingering Souls. Yes, he had to take a bit of damage to do so, but I don't think he's going to mind too much. He has now 4 Spirits in play, potential to make 2 more, and a couple of Elementals for his turn. Good turn for Gerry Thompson. His Bedlam Reveler, thanks to prowess, pretty large, that meaning it can attack in for, I believe, 5 points of damage here. And Javier Dominguez, he's drawn another sideboard card, and this one kind of an interesting one, Kambal, Consul of Allocation, a card that has actually seen some play in Vintage, where there's obviously lots of non-creature spells. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, they lose 2 life and you gain 2 life, and that's definitely something that will give Gerry a little bit of something to think about. If he's looking for a creature to remove, he's going to have to consider doing a number on Kambal first, because otherwise, on 10 life, he doesn't have very many spells to cast in total.
Absolutely. The Campbell is also one-sided. It only affects Gerry here. Of course, Javier is not really casting many non-creature spells anyway, but this is a tricky sideboard card to beat when you are such a spell-heavy deck. It doesn't really matter if it's Mardu Pyromancer, Blue-Red Pyromancer, Storm combo. I like Kambal as another human that really makes this deck sideboard much better.
So Flashback Faithless Looting, yes, it's generating an elemental. Yes, it's obviously drawing cards for Gerry. But if it hadn't found him a way of dealing with Kambal, then it would also just simply swung the race quite badly in Javier's favor. Now, as it stands, Gerry has managed to find himself some removal here. It's just a matter of which piece he wants to deploy. Discards a land, and I think that was a Thoughtseize there. But that means that he still has the potential to play a Bloodstained Mire here. And he can either go for the targeted removal of Terminate or potentially look at clearing the board out entirely with Anger of the Gods. Not necessarily too tempting considering the amount of spirits and such like that he has working for on his side of things.
Yeah, I don't think you want to Anger of the Gods when you're actually winning the race here. There's nothing too scary on the battlefield. What Gerry should consider is what happens if there's a Thalia's Lieutenant in Javier's hand. Does he have enough blockers? How much damage does he take? But it looks relatively safe from here.
Thalia's Lieutenant, probably, at least on this board, the single biggest addition that would represent more damage. And the fact that he's carefully figured out how many creatures to leave back suggests to me that he's worked through the permutations of how good or bad it could be for him depending on what Javier Dominguez draws, gets some attacks in, drops Javier Dominguez to 15, and the pickup for Dominguez is Phantasmal Image. We're going to get a chance to see potentially that same cool play that we saw in the previous games. Bedlam Reveler on the human side of things.
Okay, 3.
3 new cards. Let's see how you've done, Javier. I mean, it's hard to feel like any 3 cards that you draw are a bad deal when you've paid 1 and a blue to do so and got a 3/4 body out of it. A second copy of Noble Hierarch. That means that when this Kitesail Freebooter swings in, it's not going to be able to be traded with, even if Gerry did want to throw 2 spirits at it. That means he just blocks with the 1. And Ether Vial enough to allow Sin Collector to get cast here.
Good sign, Mark.
Yes.
Whatever plans there may have been to do good things with Anger of the Gods, they've gone away now for Gerry Thompson. He's going to have to work with other cards, and that enough to mean that the advantage bar, which has been moving around quite a bit in our quarterfinals here, again going in Javier Dominguez's favor.
Yeah, Gerry is still favored in the long term, but now his Anger of the Gods is gone. That Kitesail Freebooter is beating down, and Gerry's plan was to block it with 2 spirits. That doesn't quite work when there's a second Noble Hierarch coming down.
Yeah, it's essentially he can buy himself quite a lot of turns. There is another copy of Lingering Souls in his graveyard, but at the same time, he's not really attacking in any substantial fashion. He's going to have to hope that he can draw into something as he's busily filling his board with 1/1s that are not necessarily impacting things in terms of actually getting damage in, more so in changing people's decisions as to whether or not they want to attack at all.
And that was my problem with how Gerry approached game 1. He had the right idea of needing to be aggressive, removing Javier's outs, and then at some point he went back into control mode, but didn't have enough flood protection and card advantage mechanisms ongoing to really get there.
All the Faithless Lootings that Gerry Thompson has drawn have been now both played and flashback. Just Lingering Souls as his lone spell to work with, because his hand a little bit clogged with lands right now.
Gerry has a difficult attack here, actually. Bedlam Reveler has triggered, so it's actually good attack. Bedlam Reveler on defense that has not triggered prowess, of course, can't block it very well. And Gerry's 1/1s are able to attack here as well. What was the most difficult decision was whether to attack with the Lingering Souls tokens. This means the fact that Gerry attacked with 2 of them means that he is looking for a race. He's looking to trump block Kitesail Freebooter rather than trying to triple block it and then lose 2 of his spirit tokens that way.
Yeah, and he's sending a clear message to Javier Dominguez of that stripe also. If he had attacked with just 1 or 0 of his spirit tokens, then he's threatening the trade and potentially setting himself up for a far longer game, and that's just not the case here. Dominguez, big draw. Is it Staticaster? Gigantic draw there for Javier Dominguez. Yep. This is one of the most potent cards that he can have in this sideboard game, because he can play it at instant speed, it has haste, and he can tap it to deal 1 damage to target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that creature. There are 4 elemental tokens in play. There are 4 spirit tokens in play. Yes, there's one Young Pyromancer, but you know what? It's kind of one that you want to kill at some point. And Is it Staticaster at some point can do all of those things. Javier Dominguez, quite quick to put it into play, and starts off by mowing down spirits. That meaning that the clock on Gerry Thompson, very much real. That Kitesail Freebooter, it's attacking in. There's 2 prowess triggers here, and it will be a 3-power pirate flying through the skies and dropping Gerry Thompson to 3, putting him on lethal attacks next turn. He's in check. He's got to find a way of trying to get out of this. And at this point, 3 life might as well be 2. Gerry cracks a fetch land, thins his deck a little bit, finds 1 more land, and has to hope that this draw step is a good one for him.
Yeah, these have been some amazing games, really showing us that this 5-color humans deck also doesn't just roll over and die to Mardu Pyromancer. We know Gerry Thompson went 6-0 against humans in the Swiss portion, but once deck lists are known, once you have a player like Javier Dominguez who is just exceptionally good at aggro decks, suddenly it's a Tremendous game.
Big draw here for Gerry Thompson. He's found himself a Kolaghan's Command. Now, obviously, a lot of modes to work with on this one. He does have Bedlam Reveler in the graveyard, though, so potentially one of the things that he can do is turn that Kolaghan's Command into further draws. Unfortunately for him, even if he kills off a Noble Hierarch, because he's dropped to 2 on that fetch land, he's still in a spot where the Flying Kitesail Freebooter can take him down. Now, conveniently, while it's a 3-4 on attacks with prowess, right now that Kitesail Freebooter is a 1-2, so he does have the option of simply killing off that. But if he does so, he also needs to think about all of his elementals getting killed by his Ecstatic Caster. Has he got enough blockers on the ground?
Thankfully, Javier doesn't have much of a ground force. The 2 Noble Hierarchs are not going to do much attacking, and I absolutely agree with you, Tim. That Kitesail Freebooter cannot stay on the battlefield.
So, Gerry Thompson having to fetch a basic here. He's dropping to 1 in the use of that Marsh Flats. Did not want to go for a tapped dual land. 1 point of life. We've seen Gerry here before. Let's see if he can get out of this one.
To return.
Kills off the Kitesail Freebooter. Gets back another Bedlam Reveler. Gets to cast it for the bargain basement price of, in this case, 3 mana, I believe.
Yes, only 5 spells in the graveyard.
Draws 3 cards, and those 3 cards are not additional spells that he can play. This is very, very tight stuff here. It doesn't look like Javier Dominguez has a lethal attack based on exactly what's on the board, but there are lots of live draws for him in this situation to close the game out, because while there are lots of elemental tokens right this second, Is It Staticaster will quite happily mow down each and every one of those creatures given the first opportunity which will come in Dominguez's untap step.
Which is why I expect an attack with Bedlam Reveler and 4 of the tokens. 1, of course, having Summoning Sickness.
If you attack with Bedlam Reveler and 4 tokens, then you are saying that you're going to throw your Pyromancer under the bus, though, right?
Well, not quite under the bus. You're saying that you would have to trade it with the Sin Collector, and then the other Bedlam Reveler blocks Bedlam Reveler. I just think you have to deal as much damage as possible this turn.
So Dominguez at 9, Gerry Thompson at 1. It looks like Thalia the pickup for Javier Dominguez here. That not necessarily super impactful this turn, though at this point Javier Dominguez can reasonably try and go wide because he's got that Izzet Staticaster in order to make Gerry Thompson's ability to do so very limited indeed.
Yeah, and of course the reason why I suggested this line was that I don't value this Young Pyromancer very highly anymore now that Izzet Staticaster is on the battlefield. If you take a look at Gerry Thompson's hand, 2 more Young Pyromancers are exactly not what he's looking for until he deals with the Staticaster.
Yeah, that is its Staticaster. It can kill 3 Young Pyromancers as easily. It can kill 1. It can kill every token on the battlefield, every elemental token on the battlefield very easily indeed. Another Bedlam Reveler the pickup for Gerry Thompson here. Interesting decision. I mean, given the situation that he's in right now, are those Pyromancers in fact reasonable to just discard and try and get something better, try and find some removal?
Maybe yes, Tim. I mean, what does it help you to cast them now? They're just going to get picked off, so you're wasting 2 mana and you're not getting anything out of it.
Gerry Thompson, I think that the land that he has there is a Blackleaf Cliffs as well. I can't quite make it out.
Yes, I believe so. That is something that Gerry can play this turn, but it wouldn't generate any mana, of course.
So he would rather, by the looks of things, discard it to a Bedlam Reveler in the hopes of drawing another untapped land to potentially let him cast more spells. And if he's casting Bedlam Reveler here, he's hoping to find removal spells.
Yes.
Ideally, the cheaper, the better.
Well, it has to. It should deal with Izzet Staticaster. That's kind of the main goal. All the other creatures are, well, we can work around them somehow.
Lingering Soul's the pickup here for Gerry Thompson. Now, at least that lets him diversify his creatures that get killed off savagely by Is It Staticaster. Not necessarily putting him in a winning position, but staving off a losing one, potentially for a little bit more time. The Bedlam Revelers that are in play, his last best hope in many respects, because they are the creatures that are not going to be dying just to a straightforward tap of that Is It Staticaster.
And they are also the creatures that really, if he wants to have a realistic shot at winning this game, need to start
I
attacking.
attack you so bad.
Oh, and Gerry has the same thoughts.
'Cause you have
He
life
just said, "I want
points.
to attack you so bad." He doesn't find a way to get in there profitably without exposing himself to the backswing.
Yeah, these decisions obviously get much more complicated when you know that there's a potential for a large amount of your creatures to get shot down in one fell swoop. I guess that there are interesting, weird little lines of play around
Yes.
Is It Staticaster trying to shoot one of your creatures and you shooting it in response, but the suite of removal available to Gerry Thompson is essentially just as good at killing the Staticaster itself. If we were talking about Pascal Viren with Electrolyze, he might well shoot one of his own tokens to protect the rest from Is It Staticaster, but that's not really a play that we're likely to see in this game.
I want to attack you too.
Yeah, I believe you.
All these players desperate to hit the red zone, but not quite sure if they can do so profitably.
A bit of draw go between these two control decks.
I do agree.
Oh, big pickup there for Gerry Thompson. It's not something that can kill the Staticaster, but a Collective Brutality does let Gerry Thompson gain a little bit of life here, potentially kill off one of the other cards on the other side of the battlefield. It can target the Illusion in play on the other side of things, currently copying a Bedlam Reveler. And because if you escalate it, it will have multiple targets, it will still get to gain the life. Are there any other cards in hand, though, for Gerry Thompson?
He kept some lands around that he didn't really have use for. If you remember, the last Bedlam Reveler gave him Lingering Souls and 2 lands. So it was smart of him not to play those, which is kind of natural if you're playing a Faithless Looting deck.
2 points of life, potentially very important here, because the other thing is, Javier Dominguez on 9, if we have Gerry Thompson lining up some big attacks with Bedlam Revelers, we may be in a position where Dominguez is put in a little bit of trouble here, looking out for his own life total.
But instead what we will see is It Staticaster just taking out these tokens. Of course, what Gerry is representing here in a sense is he's bluffing a removal spell for the Staticaster, because if he had it and Javier shoots the tokens, the elemental tokens, then a removal spell on the Staticaster followed by a flashback Lingering Souls would actually be quite troublesome for Javier to deal with.
And this is what will be going through Dominguez's head here as he tries to figure out the best line of play. A pretty intricate board state here. And this is a matchup where these players, they've got each other's deck lists. They've had the evening last night to test exactly this matchup. And that means that while there's less guesswork involved, it does mean that potentially the lines of thinking to make sure that you make the right play can be a bit more detailed.
Yeah, and of course what Gerry is secretly hoping for is that Javier is so afraid of the line I just described that he makes a block that's actually not very profitable for him. In fact, if he decides to block with Is It Staticaster to keep it around as a solution for Lingering Souls, he's walking right into Gerry's trap, because he has the -2/-2 ability with Collective Brutality.
And it looks like that's exactly what we might see going on here. This is going to be very interesting to see how damage actually gets resolved here. As things stand with the blocks that Javier Dominguez has got there, there's no reason for him to be tapping these at Staticaster before damage resolves.
And there's First Strike as well, so it's even more tricky than that. Oh, Gerry did it. I have to feel that's a mistake by Javier. Exposing your Staticaster, it's the most important piece of the puzzle on the battlefield.
And Gerry Thompson there just very calmly says that, all right, take two. Potentially, masking for just a mere moment longer exactly the carnage that's about to ensue. Collective brutality. It's got escalate, and Gerry Thompson, he's got extra cards in hand, so he gets to kill off the Is It Staticaster. Yes, there's a parting shot from the Staticasters to deal with all of those Lingering Souls tokens. That's about as good as Gerry could ever have hoped for. He also gets to hit Javier Dominguez for 2, goes up to 3 himself, and then gets to flashback Lingering Souls. Look at this board state. Javier Dominguez, yes, he's still got a lot going for him, but this is a much, much better position for Gerry Thompson than he was in just a single turn ago.
Yeah. Very well played by Gerry. Something I've seen not only from him, but also from Reed Duke, this ability to get the opponent to make mistakes. That's something that's just really important at the proto level play, where decks are good, players are good, technical play is good, but finding the lines that allow your opponent to maybe overthink or just make a small misstep. That's what you need if you want to win the Pro Tour.
Yeah, and these are the sort of lines that, they separate out the great players. They're not necessarily the most obvious, either in terms of the operations involved or the sort of, how do you sell that? How do you behave? How quickly or slowly do you attack in order to make sure that if you're Javier Dominguez, it's most difficult for you to sniff out what's coming?
Yeah. Maybe even announcing, I want to attack you so badly the turn before. Everything plays a role.
So in comes Bedlam Reveler for Javier Dominguez. He's seen the writing on the wall. There's going to have to be attacks if he's going to get anywhere in this game, because the life total is getting much, much tighter here.
And of course, Prowess has triggered here. He cast Ether Vial before combat, but if Gerry just triple blocks, that's actually a clean trade.
Now, explain to me why you would triple block here rather than maybe just a double block.
I mean, a double block is very likely safe as well, but what do you do when there is a Reflector Mage in Javier's hand and it comes down instant speed with Ether Vial? You just lose your one remaining Bedlam Reveler. Oh yeah, I'm just informed that of course there's also double Exalted on that Phantasmal Image copying Bedlam Reveler, so it's actually even required to be more careful.
So one Bedlam Reveler down on each side of the battlefield, admittedly one of them a Phantasmal Image pretending to be Bedlam Reveler. 3 copies of Elemental Token along with the 2 Spirits for Gerry Thompson. And here we see a draw step Kite Cell Freebooter thanks to Ether Vial. Ether Vial on all sorts of different levels, and we can see that Gerry Thompson working with just lands in his hand. So everything that's going on, perfect information for Javier Dominguez. And given perfect information, what position does that leave him in on this turn of attacks? Gerry looks like he is going to be able to get stuck in with at least his flyers here, I believe. Though Kite Cell Freebooter also blocking one of those spirits.
Yeah, but the Revelers are the key cards, I think. Now it's really this kind of race where Gerry finds a way to attack with his Revelers. Because to be honest, 1/1 tokens are just not very good on offense. And Javier is looking at only 3 creatures that potentially could damage Gerry. None of them are lethal on their own. So there's only one real attack that Javier can make, which is attack with a Freebooter, trigger Exalted twice, and then, hope Gerry doesn't chump block, which of course he will do with his Spirit Token.
Yeah, these Spirit Tokens, they've done a fantastic job of gumming up the board, buying time for Gerry Thompson, letting him have the opportunity to get things going with Bedlam Reveler, and then on occasion also getting in damage that's very difficult for the Humans deck to block, given that it doesn't have too terribly many flyers. Double block here from Sin Collector and Thalia on the Bedlam Reveler. Obviously, that's the kind of play that would be very risky if Javier Dominguez did not know that Gerry Thompson holding only lands. As it stands, it still means that he's going to be taking a spot of damage here from Bedlam Reveler, dropping down to just a couple of points of life himself. And while the Humans deck does not run much in the way of burn, beyond, of course, the one of Kessig Malcontents, there are plenty of burn spells in Gerry Thompson's deck, meaning that taking extra damage, a worrying proposition for Dominguez.
Yeah, and imagine how this would look like if Is It Staticaster was still on the battlefield. This attack would just have not been possible.
Done.
Thompson does not play either of the lands in his hand there, even though they're known about by Javier Dominguez. And every turn for the last 4, 5, 6 turns has been a hope for a top deck from one or other of these players, because there is so much potential for explosive cards to swing this game, and the advantage bar moving around turn after turn. And depending on what Javier Dominguez draws, it's either lights out for the Spaniard or indeed for Gerry Thompson himself in this game. Though worth noting, of course, there is going to be at least one more game after this one. They're 2 games into a 5-game set here, best of 3, and each of them has picked best of 5, sorry, and each of them has picked up a single win thus far.
This has been my favorite series so far. Just really highly interactive, creature, combat-centric, lots of spells, a lot of triggers, a lot of effects, and definitely a challenge for both of these players.
So Noble Hierarch with a little help from the Noble Hierarch team, attacking in as a 2/3 there, getting blocked by an elemental token. Gerry draws for the turn, and it's a collective brutality. I think that might be enough to do it here. He's going to get a chance to deal 2 to Javier Dominguez directly, kill off one of those blockers, and advance to 2-1. Gerry Thompson, just a single game win away to a semi-finals finish. Bit of a smile there from Thompson. He knows just how tight that game was. This has been a fantastic series, Simon. You're absolutely right. And these players will be going back to their sideboards to figure out if, having seen what they have in game 3, they need to make any little spot adjustments before game 4. We're going to get a chance to have a look at those sideboards. First up, we're going to see what Javier Dominguez is working with. We saw some of his sideboard cards coming in. Of course, that is Ecstatic Caster. Very important indeed. 2 copies of that in there. Kambal, Consul of Allocation, also a big deal. Sin Collector, if anything, I mean, it was good. It took a card out of Gerry's hand, but not quite as high impact as those other 2 3-drops.
I agree, but having that available, especially at instant speed, if you draw Ether Vial, is very, very potent. And if Gerry looks like he's preparing maybe an Anger of the Gods, then you just flash Sin Collector in, and he doesn't have that available anymore. Super powerful. I agree, it's the weakest of the sideboard cards, though.
One card I want to ask you about within this sideboard, it doesn't look on the face of things all that scary, but I'm kind of intrigued as to your thoughts on it, is Auriok Champion. It's got protection from black and red, which means that all of the removal in Gerry Thompson's deck will not be hitting Auriok Champion, and it gets to gain life whenever creatures come into play, and Gerry Thompson's deck and the 5-color humans deck generating a lot of creatures. Is this a card that we might see from Javier?
I wouldn't expect it. It's definitely not wrong to bring it in, but it's not really what you want to be doing. You want to beat down and disrupt, and Auriok Champion, it will only hit for 1. So I think because you're bringing in so many disruptive elements, your aggro plan is kind of diluted anyway, and Auriok Champion would just be a bit too much for me. Maybe it's also a difference if you're on the draw or on the play. On the draw, I can see it more because you know the game will go longer. On the play, I want as many aggressive cards as possible.
Lovely stuff. And if we switch across to what Gerry Thompson's working with here, his deck is already chock full of removal spells. And by the looks of things, this sideboard was more about shoring up the more controlling matchups than the aggro ones. Which cards do you think that we're likely to see more of? We saw Collective Brutality obviously doing good work in game 3 there. Anger of the Gods, it was a one-off. It came in. It didn't ultimately achieve all that much in the game that we saw, but still, it seems a great way of blunting one of the quicker starts from humans.
Yes, and I think these 2 cards that you mentioned are the sideboard cards that are relevant in this matchup. I think Liliana of the Veil is potentially a card that Gerry wants to have. I mentioned already that I personally don't like the Blood Moon very much. I think it's too much of a gamble because of how much mana and Ether Vial activation Javier is threatening, and you certainly have some cards that you don't necessarily need in the main deck.
Now, the other card that I want to ask about, and I guess this is in a more general sense for Modern, because I'm not sure that it's good enough in this exact matchup, is Surgical Extraction. Is there value in thinking about going, well, what I'm really scared of is, say, Mantis Rider. I kill the first one and I just proactively deal with the other 3?
The idea is not wrong, but usually experience has shown that that's just not worth a card because it's too situational and you don't want to rely on there being something in the graveyard that you're afraid of coming from the top of the deck.
Very well. Well, we've just heard that the players are ready. Let's head back down to our feature match area. We're going to get a chance to see a little bit more magic from these two in our quarterfinals. Big smiles from Gerry Thompson. Both these guys, well-liked players in the game who are having a good time here, even though they're playing some very high-stakes magic indeed. Each of these players having had a fantastic 2017 series. We saw Javier Dominguez in the finals of the World Championship. Meanwhile, Gerry Thompson winning a Pro Tour, and great stuff from both of them. And early doors, Inquisition of Kozilek coming from Gerry Thompson. He gets to have a look at what's going on. Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, a couple of copies of that phantasmal image, a Champion of the Parish, and an Ancient Ziggurat. So one way or another, Javier Dominguez is threatening to play a couple of threats next turn, thanks to the Noble Hierarch on turn 1. And given that that's the case, Gerry Thompson here having a little bit of a think about exactly how he wants to sequence things.
I'm not sure if I agree with the turn 1 Noble Hierarch, Tim, because if now Gerry takes away the Champion of the Parish, you suddenly don't really have a beatdown plan anymore. You only have Thalia as a disruption piece. You don't even have something to copy with Phantasmal Image. Imagine the alternative of going for a turn 1 Champion of the Parish. Then no matter what Gerry takes, you can follow it up with a human, Thalia or Phantasmal Image.
Well, it was Champion of the Parish that got taken. Thalia came down, but I believe Thalia was also the pickup for Javier Dominguez, so that one's going to be stranded in his hand for a little bit. Thompson, meanwhile, gets the opportunity to throw down a copy of Young Pyromancer, and then reveals his hand to Javier, thanks to Kitesail Freebooter, revealing, well, we got some removal, Lightning Bolt, Collective Brutality, and Terminate alongside that Lingering Souls. In terms of what you're taking away here, one way or another, that Kitesail Freebooter, Gerry Thompson can kill at a moment's notice. Do you just force him to do it with a 2-mana removal spell rather than a 1?
It's tricky, because mana efficiency is relevant in this early stage of the game. It's going to be irrelevant later on, and Lightning Bolt and Terminate can kill a Mantis Rider, Collective Brutality cannot. Lightning Bolt and Terminate can also kill as its static caster, Collective Brutality cannot. So if you take Collective Brutality here, you actually force Gerry to use basically a more powerful spell on the freebooter.
That's a really interesting point, Simon. It's one of those ones that sort of, that's super long game thinking. Obviously, there is the potential for this humans deck to simply beat down in the early turns anyway, but I guess that if you're beating down in the early turns, you don't need to think too much about all of those other elements. It just sort of happily works out.
But Javier is also not beating down very heavily this game, so that's of course would influence my decision here.
Now, the phantasmal images that Javier Dominguez has in hand, he has the potential to have them be more copies of Kitesail Freebooter or Noble Hierarch. Obviously, copying the Thalia, not that exciting, and copying Young Pyromancer in your deck with very few spells, not that great. Is it worth holding on to them for more high-impact targets, do you think?
Well, if the freebooter survives, you can definitely copy it. And if you don't have any plays, I think you will just copy something here, even if it's just Noble Hierarch. Or I would have to think about the fact whether Noble Hierarch or Young Pyromancer is the more powerful card.
13.
Probably the Hierarch. The Hierarch we saw in Game 3 is just a very, very nice card. Now, what is happening is exactly what I described. Javier, with his choice of Kitesail Freebooter, gave Gerry the perfect turn. He used the card he wanted to use to deal with the Freebooter, and I think that's just a mistake.
13, 13.
So we have Lightning Bolt in hand for Gerry Thompson here, alongside Terminator's removal, Lingering Souls also chilling out in his hand for now, and with the appropriate white mana to cast it from hand, as well as flashing it back from the graveyard, of course. Ether Vial a pickup for Javier Dominguez. That one of the cards that you really do want to be deploying on turn 1 if you can, though I'm guessing that this game is going to go on long enough that it ends up having a reasonably large amount of value.
Yeah, also, Javier's deck is quite expensive after sideboarding.
Gerry Thompson taking a couple of early hits here, but with that Young Pyromancer in play, it's not too difficult for him to get creatures into play to do blocking if he needs to. And a Faithless looting the pickup, and that means that he can potentially be able to cast a few spells this turn. Kicks things off with Lightning Bolt on Thalia. That the most easy way to actually unlock the mana that he needs to cast multiple spells.
Yeah, now he's pulling ahead here, as you can see.
2 copies of Lingering Souls to potentially discard to Lingering Souls here, but given the land situation he's in, elects to discard one of the lands anyway. With 4 lands, he's able to do a fair amount, and the temptation to cast and flashback Lingering Souls enough that he's able to adjust his plan just a touch. Noble Hierarch, the pickup for Javier Dominguez.
Only Sin Collector, I believe, punishes you for keeping Lingering Souls in your hand in that kind of spot. On the other hand, Grafdigger's Cage punishes you heavily if you rely on your graveyard too much. A single copy in Javier's sideboard. Don't know if he brings it in, but I would strongly consider it.
So Noble Hierarch, naturally a 0-1, but with Exalted attacking in as a 2-3 there, and able to take down one of the elemental tokens. Gerry Thompson on 12 life, and with a supply of blockers for these singleton attacks. And I guess that's the tricky bit when it comes to attacking with exalted creatures in the face of Young Pyromancer. Very hard to gain any real kind of traction when you're only attacking with a single creature a turn and your opponent has ways to so easily generate more sacrificial lambs to get in the way.
Exactly, and especially in the face of what we know is it Staticaster being in Javier's sideboard. I like just blocking here every time you have the chance. You are pulling ahead as the game progresses. You're actually the one dealing damage already. You have too much value to get to empty your hand. You drew your Bedlam Reveler. Why take 2 damage that you don't have to take?
Not quite sure how many spells in Gerry Thompson's graveyard in total, so how cheap that Bedlam Reveler will be. But he has Faithless Looting and Lingering Souls in there if he simply wants to cast spells from that graveyard. And starts things off by using the Lingering Souls in hand. 3 tokens for 3 mana, a great rate no matter which way you slice it, and of course 2 of those tokens are flying. Javier Dominguez really needs to find something pretty sharpish here if he's going to get back in this game and this match, because if Gerry Thompson picking up this game, he will be advancing to the semi-finals where he would face, I believe it's going to be Pascal Viren, who won his match against Andrea Mengucci.
No. And it looks like Javier has been holding these phantasmal images.
Potentially he might find himself a Bedlam Reveler, though that of course would mean that the second phantasmal image that he was holding isn't going to do a whole lot.
There's no way to get around that. I mean, you can be tricky with Ether Vial, but still there will be a trigger on the stack that says discard your hand, so I don't really see...
I mean, if you cast one and then with the trigger on the stack put one into play with Ether Vial, then you end up with 2 Bedlam Revelers, right?
You do get both Revelers, but you don't get 6
you're still
cards.
going to discard one set of the 3 cards, yes. Well, for now, Gerry Thompson perfectly happy to just generate more tokens each and every turn. Does not need to be reloading with the Bedlam Reveler just yet. And the fact that the only creature on the battlefield on Javier Dominguez's side of things is a Noble Hierarch means that even a Young Pyromancer attacking in there, Gerry unafraid of the untapped Ether Vial.
Why does Javier not flash in a Phantasmal Image here to just block the Young Pyromancer? He has 2 in hand, and he doesn't really have anything to do with them. He's actually been holding them since the beginning of the game, and has just not found any line of play to do anything with them. Yeah,
I mean, even just having them come into play, they can copy a Spirit, for example.
Yeah, I think that's actually really low value, but I would have liked to see an ambush of the Pyromancer.
So Thoughtseize taking one of those phantasmal images, the other one left in hand, and now that he knows that there is a phantasmal image in hand, it'll be interesting to see whether or not Gerry Thompson is still attacking in with his copy of Young Pyromancer here.
Tim, I think he knew for a long time, he was suspecting for a long time that there was a phantasmal image in his opponent's hand. And if you ask me, that's why he's not casting Bedlam Reveler.
And attacks plus collective brutality, enough to close things out. Little smile and a nod there from Gerry Thompson. He kind of understood where that game was going and was sort of happy to close things out. But obviously, Javier Dominguez, a nice guy, didn't want to be sort of rubbing it in or anything there. He's just content to get through this quarterfinals. We're going to see more of Gerry Thompson in the semifinals. Fantastic performance from Javier Dominguez, making his first Pro Tour top 8. But that is the end of our quarterfinals here in Bilbao, Spain, at Pro Tour rivals of Ixalan. We'll be seeing more of Pascal Viren and indeed Gerry Thompson in the semifinals soon enough. But fantastic matches there, Simon. Really enjoyed the level of interaction and interplay, especially in that Gerry Thompson match.
Yes, really awesome.
Fantastic stuff. Pascal Viren, of course, still undefeated in our Pro Tour here. Lots of draws in there, but in the meantime, can anyone actually stop him? We'll have to wait and see. Just a couple more rounds for the perfect game from him. We will see you soon enough with more magic. But from me, Tim, and from Simon here, it's goodbye for now.
Hello and welcome back to the News Desk for coverage of Rivals of Ixalan Pro Tour. Maria, joined by Paul and Simon here at the desk, and we've got BDM down on the floor with our latest victor, Gerry Thompson.
Maria, Gerry, tell me about that turn with Izzet Staticaster. You needed your opponent to block a token and not activate the Staticaster. What was happening there?
I want to say like, oh, I hooked him so good, but realistically, it was just like a very precise scenario where his life total was low. I had a Lingering Souls in the graveyard. He wanted to keep his Staticaster untapped in case like I killed it. He wanted to kill the flying tokens, which are obviously a bigger threat, both because they attack his life total and they can block Mantis Riders and stuff. So it's just like the perfect scenario where I get to make this attack with these elementals that looks kind of scary, but in my mind, I'm just like, they're all gonna die. But he wants to keep his life total high, doesn't want to die to a lightning bolt, so it's kind of risky to block with the O3 because I have some things that do 2 damage or -2/-2, but I also have some things that deal 3 damage, you know? So I think it was a close choice for him, but yeah, as soon as he blocked and it was just like final, I'm just like, yes, like I think I'm gonna win now, whereas before I thought I was definitely gonna lose.
Key turn in the match for you?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, a lot of people at the table, we always wonder what they're thinking. I think I know you long enough to know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how am I going to change this deck for Grand Prix Toronto next weekend?
Oh, yeah, no, I figured that out already. Manamorphose is excellent. I wish I played more copies. Obviously, it's kind of bad against decks with Thalia, right? But you want the Turbo Bedlam Revelers, the fast Young Pyromancers and stuff, and also Dark Blast. Dark Blast would be sick. It is exactly what the deck wants. It's like recursive removal against humans. You can just always kill Thalia. In the mirror match, you could always kill Young Pyromancer. I definitely want 1 main, 1 board. Also, the Dredge is awesome. Like, I blew it.
Gerry Thompson blew it all the way into the semifinals here at Grand Prix Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan.
Thanks so much, BDM. Well, we've already had a very exciting morning here at the Pro Tour. Let's take a quick look at our bracket to see where we've been and where we have to go for our quarterfinals. We started things off with Ken Yukihiro versus Reed Duke, Black Red Hollow One versus Abzen. Ken Yukihiro came out on top there. Luis Salvato on Lantern Control versus Jan Emmanuel Depra on Traverse Shadow. Luis Salvato was our victor there. Pascal Viren over Andrea Mengucci. And once again, Gerry Thompson over Javier Dominguez. All right, so Paul, moment of the morning for you so far. What has it been?
Mine's really easy. Ken Yukihiro playing the Black Red Hollow One deck, which is capable of playing turn 1 Hollow One. Well, guess what? He played 2 of them twice.
It was
both
insane.
In games 1 and game 3 on the play. Turn 1 Burning Inquiry, dodging those Hollow Ones and making sure they were in his hand and putting both into play. It was just way too much for Reed Duke to actually overcome.
Yeah, and how about you, Simon?
Well, for me, I have to say these matches played out more from the results perspective, pretty much how I and we expected. We have the favorites matchup-wise going through to the semifinals. But this matchup between Gerry Thompson and Javier Dominguez, that was a lot tighter, a lot more interactive, a lot closer than I had anticipated.
Thanks. A lot more great stuff to come this afternoon yet, I'm sure. But for now, we're going to take you once again inside the battlefield. We're going to meet Therese Nielsen, one of everybody's favorite Magic the Gathering artists. But first, inside R&D to learn more about designing dinos.
It's great to have vampires, it's great to have merfolk, it's great to have pirates, but we all know that dinosaurs are the top of the food chain.
Rivals of Ixalan features 5 elder dinosaurs, 1 for each color, these enormous ancient dinosaurs. They awakened when the Golden City was awakened by the merfolk Kumena. So they rise up, and they're not just really old dinosaurs. These are primal beings. These speak to the nature of dinosaur kind on Ixalan, and now they are rampaging on the loose.
When designing for Rivals of Ixalan, we knew we needed something that kicked the word dinosaur into a whole new gear. So we decided to set up a mini-team and figure out what would a cycle of elder dinosaurs look like in the Golden City. We came up with lots of ideas. We came up with, piles of keywords, very strong evasive abilities, the untap mechanic that we've used a few times throughout history. We wound up deciding to just use all of them. The elder dinosaurs are each on their own just a super cool, iconic looking creature, and they don't need to look like one another. They're all super dangerous.
With each one, we kind of wanted to show off something unique about that elder dinosaur, and also in addition to that, appeal to different types of players. So you get a wide swath of different big creatures that if one person or another person who has a different play style, we're looking at them, try to get it to the place where everyone can find something in these 6 cards that they really like.
So when we designed the set, it clearly had all of our factions, and the dinosaurs were in red, green, and white. But what kept coming up is, come on, we're doing dinosaurs. We have to do dinosaurs in more than just the 3 colors. Can't every color have a dinosaur? So we said, okay, for Rivals, what we'll do is we'll make 1 cycle of dinosaurs. Occasionally we make a cycle of dragons or something. We'll do a cycle of dinosaurs. And we came up with this idea of having them be elder dinosaurs, like these, really giant old dinosaurs. So, okay, if you like playing blue or you like playing black, okay, we got a dinosaur for you.
So Nezahal, the blue elder dinosaur, is all about being the king of the control matchup. If you look at every line of text, it sort of feeds into that same idea. It can't be countered. You can have as many cards in your hand as you want. Whenever your opponent tries to cast, a counter spell or a removal spell, card draw spell, whatever they're trying to do, you get an extra card. And then if they ever try to get rid of it, you can also discard some cards to sort of save it and protect it. It's got a lot of different abilities, but they all feed into this same type of thing that you want, which is you're playing in this control matchup against another control deck, and you're gonna just dominate it because you have this dinosaur.
So I actually got to watch Nezahal being illustrated because it was done by our own in-house concept artist, Sam Burley, who's also a fantastic illustrator. And I remember watching him just sort of squee out over the idea of painting this giant underwater elder dinosaur and just concentrating on, getting the lighting effects in the water. And I mean, he just really cared about this thing. And I would not want to swim in that lake.
Italy, Primal Storm, that's a fun one. We had some debate internally about, well, this is attacking you and stealing cards off the top of your library. Shouldn't a pirate be doing that? And in the end, we concluded, no, a dinosaur can do whatever it wants. Galta, Primal Hunter, was another one of our earliest elder dinosaur designs. The idea being, well, the green elder dinosaur should just be really, 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 really big.
Zakama, Primal Calamity. So one of the very first pieces of concept art that was actually developed for the entire Ixalan block was a 3-headed Tyrannosaurus by Sam Burley. It was one of our proofs of concept for, what do we want to do with dinosaurs in this world. And the whole time through Ixalan, James Wyatt and I were working together on the concepts, and he's like, we should do the 3-headed Tyrannosaur. I'm just like, wait for it. We've got a spot for it later. Just save it. And so finally, in Rivals of Ixalan, we got to do the 3-headed Tyrannosaur, and it is Zakama. And it's so cool. I can't believe it went from this tiny little piece of concept art where it was a lot smaller in its initial design. It was this big, and there's a little dude it's chasing it and everything, and it was kind of funny. And this just looks badass.
So Zakama started from the idea of having a 3-headed elder dinosaur, the oldest sort of ancient monstrosity that's awoken and is, stomping around Orazca. So we always knew that we wanted, 3 colors, and we wanted to play up this idea of 3s. So you see 3 keywords, 3 different abilities. When we got to the place of having 3 different activated abilities, but of course it's a huge dinosaur, it's going to cost a lot of mana, how do we sort of marry those things together? Was okay, well, you have to get to a ton of mana to cast this. What if we just gave you all your mana back, and then immediately you could activate all these activated abilities as many times as you had mana for in that turn and start firing off the different abilities?
Throughout both Ixalan sets, we drew on real-world dinosaurs for inspiration, but our goal was never to be scientifically accurate. So, particularly in this set, when we had covered a lot of the standard bases, we moved on to some weirder looking dinosaurs, some things that are technically not dinosaurs. We found inspiration in a lot of places. Cacophodon is a funny-looking horned beast that its look and its name and its flavor text all grew out of its mechanic, which is when it becomes enraged by taking damage, it makes a loud noise and untaps a target creature. Had a lot of fun with naming that as, yep, this is a loud bellowing dinosaur.
Trapjaw Tyrant is one of my designs. Takes a classic white ability, the Oblivion Ring, the Banisher Priest ability, applies it to Enrage, so it's a sensible fit, and the flavor is that the dinosaurs are eating you.
Crested Herd Caller is what we call a 2-for-1 in limited. It's a card that gives you another card's worth of value. So you get 2 3/3s on one card, and sometimes that can even be better than a 6/6 because your 3/3 can trade for their 3/3, and your other 3/3 can trade for their removal spell, and then you're just getting all this value from one card.
Form of the Dinosaur is an obvious homage to Form of the Dragon. In this case, you become a dinosaur. You become basically a 15/15, and then every turn you, not one of your creatures, you fight one of your opponent's creatures. There was a lot of movement on this card. How much life do you start at? What does the damage dealing back to you look like? What is the timing of this, etc., etc. But the concept, we knew we had to have this concept.
Form of the Dinosaur changed in little ways from its very beginning, but ever since day one, we had Darken Down as the artist to illustrate this card.
So in Ixalan, Huatli was red-white and a little more entrenched with the dinosaur tribe, making dinosaur tokens and caring about big creatures. Now Huatli's has undergone a bit of a change, and she's green-white, more magnanimous, and is more about getting all the creatures in there. So cats, dinosaurs, it's all good for Huatli.
Huatli does something a little bit different. Its plus just gives you more loyalty. So if you're playing a go wide creature deck, you can plus Huatli, get a ton of loyalty, and then maybe even ultimate the turn after. And then once you ultimate, then you can just gain a ton of value every time you put a creature into play.
So in design, we talk about two different types of design. That there's the super ego design. That's design that's very, very mental. That what makes the design so much fun is realizing how things click together and kind of the mental challenges of understanding how it works. But then there's id design. And what id design is, it's personal, it's emotional, it's just guttural, it's visceral. And that one of the fun things about Ixalan and Rivals of Ixalan is it is an id design. You know what I'm saying? That you get green merfolk and you get white vampires and you get pirates. Arr, I'm a pirate. Or you get to play dinosaurs. Arr, it's a dinosaur. So I hope you guys have had as much fun as we have in making this set. Rivals of Ixalan actually is the end of one thing, which is for years in Magic, we've done big sets and small sets. So Rivals of Ixalan is our last small set. So while I'm really, really excited that moving to the new system allows us to do a lot of things we can't do before, but I do, as a longtime Magic player, someone who's made a lot of small sets in my day, I do want to say, bye-bye, small sets.
a lot of people see or feel the spirituality in my work. I really like capturing kind of that golden vein of truth that goes through, I think, all religions and all philosophies. There's like some beauty and truth that I think is compassionate and loving, and beauty is also a spiritual thing, I think, and a high ideal to try and attain. Those are some of the things I try and put in where someone feels like they can look at my work and like, oh wow, what happened? Or I want people to feel better, feel good, or some respite when they look at my art. So.
In a cozy home in Carson City, surrounded by the mountains of the Sierra Nevada, lives one of Magic the Gathering's most renowned and beloved artists. Therese Nielsen has illustrated over 200 Magic cards with increasing mastery over the last 22 years. Her world is one in which art, craft, and familial love are inseparable.
Growing up in Nebraska was a very small town, a little farm. Well, I grew up on a farm. Dad was a farmer. Mom always had a pile of paper for us sitting around. So a lot of our spare time was spent, reading or drawing. Mine was more drawing than reading. The first Magic commission actually was, they came around and asked if I wanted to do Magic when it very, very first started. I think it was Ice Age.
In the early days, she was a maniac. She would just, production line, just painting after painting. She was cranking them out, and she was working really, really hard.
So I did a couple calendar pieces for Magic first, and then my very first Magic set was Alliances. I think I did 6 pieces, but Force of Will was the very first Magic card I did. Sue Ann Harkey, the art director, she said, I think this one is going to be, I think, a pretty good card. That's what she said. It should be a pretty good card. It was basically supposed to be a red shaman. It was going to be a red card called Stop Spell. And so I just sort of based it on this red fire mage with kind of lizard type of armor and pointy teeth and stuff. Through the years, it's just taken a life of its own and continues. The geometries in the work, I'm just fascinated by it. I know the underpinnings of nature itself is really quite mathematical, with the way leaves grow and the patterns of ferns unfolding and things. It's done in a very beautiful, designed sort of way, and I never really know exactly what I'm gonna put. That stuff will just kind of go, that one, that's the one that wants to be in there. Models through the years is usually always my family and sometimes friends, but I generally am already partly late or something, so it's I need you right now, to get under the light and take this pose.
We've been in a lot of ridiculous positions and dressed in very, very funny things. And it's wow, if people could really see what we do behind the scenes, it would be surprising.
I modeled for Sidri. It was interesting. I think it took like 5 hours to just get like a couple of shots. I literally had to hold this like pose for quite a while, just like, no, that's not the right look. And I had all these like weird things going on.
Modeling for my mom's stuff was always really fun. She's had me do stuff for her illustrations pretty much since I was born. She'd be like, oh, hold this piece of cardboard, hold this plastic tube, stand on this desk, and then seeing her kind of terraform that into something that actually looks appealing instead of some stupid 10-year-old standing on a desk with a cardboard tube.
Am I there? More? Okay. There we go. Not bad, huh? So also, more than just putting me on there, which I still do because it's fun, I get my big boxes of play mats and put them on there, and my shipping tubes and all of that kind of stuff. So it saves me lots of trips up the stairs, and it's just kind of fun, right? I've always wanted to have like a garage because I love tools, like actual tools. So like a garage and studio together, because lots of times I need these to do mixed media, weird kind of carve this or drill into that or whatever. Magic has been with me since really the beginning of my career, almost, except for maybe the first 2 years. So it's like this dear friend of mine that like has, it kind of makes me sad. It's just continued to be more and more amazing in my world. The people, you know, I get letters all the time from people that say I've changed their life with art that I've done. It's gone from just being a job to something that's really special to me, the community and the art that I get to do and the people. I've always felt like the people were so nice and respectful and like just loved. They're just so nice to me and care about what I do, and that's just feels like the luckiest thing to be able to be a part of.
Brian David Marshall here in Bilbao, Spain, proving we can find stairs for me to climb almost anywhere in the world. But we're on the eve of Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan, and we asked members of Team Ultra Pro, Team Metagame Guru's Sun, and Team Metagame Guru's Moon who their Pro Tour rival was. Let's hear what they had to say.
So I don't think I have a rival per se, but I do have someone that I don't want to play, and that's Reed Duke, just because I think we've played 5 times and he's 4-1 against me. So I just feel like he doesn't really make mistakes.
Definitely Seth Manfield for me. The person I played probably more at Grand Prix than at Pro Tours. I did manage to best him. Like one of the few times I bested him was a bit during the Pro Tour that I won in Shadows over in Estrade. So a long while ago when I first started on the Pro Tour, we were on the same team, and he used a deck of mine to win Worlds. So we kind of have a pretty great relationship, but definitely still very competitive. And he's probably one of the most competitive Magic players that I know. So definitely an ongoing thing with him.
For me, it's Thiago Saporito. He beat me in my first PD debate, and ever since we played like 6 or 7 times, and I beat him only once. And I played him last week in London, and I lost again. And it's just becoming crazy, you know. I just hope I beat him one day.
The player I think I'm losing to most is Yuya Watanabe. I played the guy for several times in the past few years. I was never able to beat him until recent World Magic Cup. That was the first time I was able to beat him, like, I don't know, maybe 7th try or something. He always beats me, he's just too good.
Li Shichan beat me playing for top 8 of my first Pro Tour, which was Pro Tour Fate Reforged. And I don't lose to many people, so that's my nemesis.
Hello and welcome back to the news desk here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. Maria, joined by Paul and Simon, and we're going to take a look at our semifinal match coming up later this afternoon in just a little bit. But first, let's review what we've already seen this morning. Here's a look at our top 8 bracket. Earlier today, we saw Ken Yukihiro best Reed Duke, Luis Salvato with his Lantern deck over Jean-Emmanuel Depras, Pascal Viren over Andrea Mengucci, and Gerry Thompson was the winner over Javier Dominguez. So now we head into things. Ken Yukihiro versus Luis Salvato. Let's take a look at Ken Yukihiro. There he is, Team Musashi, of course, the reigning Team Series champion. This is his 4th Pro Tour top 8. His previous best finished 3rd at Amonkhet. He's made more than $100,000 playing Magic, and let's take a look at his deck. It is Black Red Hollow One. This is, you know, in my opinion, the absolute coolest deck that we're seeing in our top 8, and I think one that a lot of people will be wanting to try out after this tournament. So taking a look at this deck, Paul, just basically walk us through what does it want to do and how does it do it?
Well, basically what the deck wants to do is play Hollow One as quickly as possible, but there are many other angles of attack as well. But what it has multiple ways to basically filter through its deck. You have cards like Burning Inquiry, Faithless Looting, and Goblin Lore to basically be able to just discard a bunch of cards at once. Hopefully, some of these are random, by the way, so hopefully not discard the Hollow Ones in your hand.
Is this a risk for this deck, or is it redundant?
I mean, it's one of those high-risk, high-reward type cards. And actually, I think Brian David Marshall talked to Ken Yukihiro. He's like, hey, what happens if you discard Hollow One? He's like, you know what? You just have to learn to not be sad. Don't be sad when you discard Hollow One, because you know what? At the end of the day, that's what you signed up for. That's what you do. You know, but on the flip side, the upside is so high.
Oh, yeah.
We saw him play multiple copies of Hollow One on turn 1 in games 1 and 3.
And he can just play a Gurmag Angler too.
Yeah,
Another angler of attack.
Wow, I thought Rich wasn't
where's
at the
Rich?
desk. He's right there, apparently.
Yeah, I guess so.
So does anybody know where this deck came from?
Well, so I actually asked him, asked Shota, because he was actually part of their testing team, Team Musashi, and I was like, hey, where'd you guys find this list? And he's like, Magic Online. I was like, what happened? He's like, 5-0, good deck. And then they just locked it in and just practiced draft.
This is, by the way, this deck has evolved over time. We've seen lists first with Hollow One and Vengewine, but they weren't really that successful. I think Flameblade Adept is a really good inclusion, and just maximizing on Burning Inquiry and Goblin Lore put this deck over the top. Can we say 100% conversion rate from day 1 to day 2? That's not just some fringe deck that got lucky.
And it proves that there's still room for innovation in Modern, even now.
Right.
All right, let's take a look at Luis Salvato, his opponent. There you see him on your screen. He is a Gold Pro Team Herrenjuja Latin. This is the second Pro Tour top 8, last Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad, 5 GP top 8s, and 1 team win. Let's take a look at the deck. There it is, Lantern Control. Love it or hate it, here it is in our semifinals. Simon, how do you feel about this deck overall?
Love it.
This is your jam?
I'm strongly considering learning this deck, but it takes a long time to really master it. It has a unique approach to Magic. You have to really relearn, unlearn certain things that we have known for years that are just not relevant or important with this deck. It does win by locking its opponent completely out of the game. We always see two things basically. Ensnaring Bridge protects you from attackers. Modern is a very creature-centric format. And then you combine Lantern of Insight with Codex Shredder. So that way, if there is a solution to Ensnaring Bridge on the opponent's library, it goes in the graveyard.
Well, why don't we hear from Luis Salvato himself, how he plans to play this matchup versus Hollow One.
Brandon Marshall here with Pro Tour semifinalist Luis Salvato. Luis, you got further in this Pro Tour top 8 than you did in your first Pro Tour top 8.
Yes, for sure. My first Pro Tour top 8 was like a ridiculous deck, so I couldn't play any good game against Seth Manfield. But this time I had a good deck, and I'm ready to play.
Now, you're playing against one of the craziest decks in this tournament, the Hollow One deck. How do you feel about this matchup?
Well, I think in the main it's a good matchup, and post-board I think it's still a good matchup, and I'm sure he knows really well his deck, so if he say he don't want to face me, I want to face him. I believe more in his than in my ideas for the matchup.
What's going to be the key for you in those pre-sideboarded games? What are you going to be looking for as you look at your opening hands?
I'm mulligan aggressively to a bridge hand or a kind of good hand, but essentially with a bridge in the play, he can't beat me in the first games. And post-board, the same, plus some cash and welding shards.
All right, Luis Salvato, good games the rest of the way here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan.
All right, thanks so much, BDM. Turn it over to you. Who do you think is going to win this match, Paul?
I actually, because Ken was the first match, I actually went up to him afterwards, and he was actually testing the matchup already. And I went up to him and was like, hey, what do you think of the matchup? And he's like, this is terrible. Okay? Because what his deck is looking to do is just play a bunch of creatures, but he has no way to really interact with a deck like Lantern. He doesn't have artifact removal in the main deck. All he's looking to do is turbo out a bunch of creatures and just attack his opponent. And one weakness to that is Ensnaring Bridge. So the way he can get it done is by making sure he gets Hollow Ones in play really, really quickly.
How about you, Simon?
I completely agree with Paul. I actually talked to Luis, and he's super happy about facing Hollow One.
All right, well, it's time to see it. The players are ready. Let's head down to the feature match area for semifinal number 1.